Chapter 369. It was undeniable that this was an extremely powerful spiritual pattern, and its power was definitely far beyond any of the spiritual patterns that Lu Yi had mastered before. However, Lu Yi didn't dare to try to activate it rashly. Judging from the complexity of this spirit inscription, the amount of spirit energy required to construct this spirit inscription was extremely large. With Lu Ye's current cultivation, if he really wanted to construct this spirit inscription, he was afraid that his spirit energy would be exhausted. This thing was similar to a trump card. Once it was used, either the enemy or himself would die. However, the name Fire Phoenix reminded Lu Yi of some unpleasant experiences. When he cultivated the red lotus soaring to the sky's secret art, it came with two kinds of techniques, one of which was the Fire Phoenix technique. As a result, Lu Yi somehow turned it into the Fire Quail technique. It wasn't until he returned from the Immortal Essence City that his soul power greatly increased, and his control of spiritual power improved by leaps and bounds, that the form of the technique improved. At present, Lu Yi didn't use many techniques, and all the cultivators in 9 regions knew that he was a weapon cultivator. It was difficult for him to use techniques to cover up his school. Moreover, his method of controlling equipment was powerful. When he attacked the enemy from a distance, he only needed to control the equipment, and there was no need to use techniques. Now, his talent tree had swallowed an incomplete and weak Phoenix True Fire, which allowed him to obtain the Fire Phoenix spiritual pattern. Moreover, when he was in a coma, he also witnessed the majestic appearance of the vermilion bird. All these experiences made his understanding of the Fire Phoenix technique reach an indescribable level. It could be said that in the entire 9 regions, no one knew more about the Fire Phoenix than him. With a slight thought, his spirit energy surged. When he raised his hand and pointed, the Fire Phoenix technique was displayed. A fiery red figure suddenly pounced out, dragging a long tail. The feathers on its body were extremely exquisite, and the patterns were clearly visible. Under his control, this technique was like a living thing, hovering above his head, and immediately landed on a nearby tree trunk, where it lowered its head and combed its feathers. Then, with a bang, it collapsed and turned into a little fluorescent light. Now, the Fire Phoenix technique he displayed was undoubtedly many times more powerful than before. This was not only because of the improvement of his strength, but also because of the various benefits brought by this experience. It was an unexpected gain. After all, there was still a problem of continuity when using the equipment to kill the enemy. There was no need for techniques. As long as the spiritual power in the body was enough, techniques could be cast at will. Moreover, Lu Yi also found an unexpected surprise. The royal jelly had a permanent effect on qi, blood, and spiritual power. He didn't know how long he had been in a coma, but compared to before, the flow of his qi, blood, and spirit energy had not weakened. Instead, it seemed to have sped up. This undoubtedly showed that the effect of the royal jelly was not temporary. Come to think of it, with such a huge bee colony working hard to produce only half a bowl of royal jelly, it must be extraordinary. Lu Yi checked the array he had set up and found that there were traces of it being activated. It seemed that it had been activated by a nearby demonic beast. This made Lu Yi rejoice. Fortunately, he had been careful enough to set up a chain array. Otherwise, after being unconscious for so long, he would have been in a terrible state. There was a sudden movement from the battlefield imprint. Lu Yi looked down and saw that it was a message from Yi. His expression gradually turned grave. There was more than one message from Yi, and there were several of them. They were all sent while he was unconscious, but he couldn't respond at that time. Looking at the time, 5 or 6 days had passed. Yi's message was a cry for help. She and Giant Armor had been waiting for Lu Yi to meet up with them somewhere outside the hidden fog mountain. In the end, they were discovered by a passing cultivator from the Myriad Demon's Ridge. With no other choice, Giant Armor could only flee with Yi and Hu Pa. Giant Armor's physical characteristics were too obvious. Moreover, many people from the Myriad Devil Ridge had seen him with Lu Yi, so they naturally knew that they were together. So many people from the Myriad Devil Ridge had chased Lu Yi to the hidden fog mountain, but they had not been able to do anything to Lu Yi. Now that they had discovered giant armor, how could they let him go? Fortunately, giant armor was not so easy to deal with. His physique was stronger than the average Heaven Rank 9 cultivator. Many cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge had surrounded him, but he still managed to kill his way out. Originally, giant armor wanted to bring Yi and Hoopa back to the hidden fog mountain because Lu Yi was definitely there. Although they did not know why they could not contact him, as long as they entered the hidden fog mountain, they would have a chance to find Lu Yi and meet up with him. However, giant armor did not have Lu Yi's various methods and speed. After several failed attempts, they encountered more and more enemies. They had no choice but to escape in the direction away from the hidden fog mountain. In terms of escaping, giant armor was stronger than Lu Yi in terms of both his physique and endurance. He had his own unique Yao core, so his spirit power reserve was extremely large. As long as his physical strength could keep up, he could continue flying until the energy in his Yao core was exhausted. This was something that no spirit stream realm cultivator could compare to. As time passed, more and more people from the Myriad Devil Ridge were dispatched. Although the Grand Heaven Alliance had many countermeasures, they were unable to contain all the cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge. Now, giant armor had brought Yi and Hoopa to hide in a dangerous place called the Myriad Poison Forest. The situation was not very good. Firstly, the Myriad Poison Forest was marked as a dangerous place on the map. Like the Land of Fire, it was a forbidden area for cultivators. The danger of that place was similar to the Land of Fire. The danger of the Land of Fire came from the incomplete and weak true Phoenix Fire. The closer one was to the center, the more intense the environment would be. The danger of the Myriad Poison Forest was poison. It was shrouded in a boundless poisonous miasma all year round. The deeper one went, the more intense the poison was. Not only was the environment harsh, but there were also many poisonous creatures living there, from small spiders and ants to large poisonous pythons and fierce beasts. Even the spirit plants that lived there were extremely poisonous. They had no choice but to hide in the Myriad Poison Forest because there were many cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge. Giant armor had nowhere to run. There was no other way except for the Myriad Poison Forest. Currently, they were near the periphery of the Myriad Poison Forest and could not escape because the entire Myriad Poison Forest was surrounded by Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. The people from the Myriad Devil Ridge did not dare to go deep into the Myriad Poison Forest. They had made up their minds to trap giant armor inside. At the same time, they were waiting for Lu Yi because they were certain that Lu Yi would not abandon giant armor. As long as they guarded giant armor, Lu Yi would definitely come. As time passed, more and more Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators gathered in the direction of the Myriad Poison Forest. "Hold on, wait for me," Lu Yi hurriedly replied. He collected the formation flags that he had scattered around and took out his spirit boat to soar into the sky. Soon, Yi replied, "The situation is okay. The poison here is not too strong. The honey collected in the hidden fog mountain has some detoxification effect. We can still hold on. Be careful." The fact that ordinary honey had a detoxifying effect surprised Lu Yi, but it wasn't strange when he thought about it. Bees were poisonous by nature, and honey brewed by poisonous bees naturally had a detoxifying effect. This was the same principle as most places where poisonous snakes appeared had detoxifying herbs. Fortunately, giant armor and the others had brought a lot of honey with them. Otherwise, they would not have been able to hold on. From the 10-point map, the Myriad Poison Forest was not close to the hidden fog mountain. It could be seen that giant armor had fled with Yi and Hoopa without stopping. Otherwise, it would not make sense for them to run so far away in just a few days. It was not that Yi had not thought of entering a Grand Heaven Alliance's base to take refuge. However, if they really went there, they would definitely bring disaster to the Grand Heaven Alliance. Moreover, without Lu Yi and the Guardian there signing an alliance contract, they would not be able to use the other party's Tianji pillar to return to the 9 states. The final result would be that their refuge would be besieged by tens of thousands of myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. Then, the base would be destroyed and giant armor and the others would have nowhere to run. Therefore, entering the myriad poison forest was their only choice. There was one thing that Yi did not tell Lu Yi. The myriad Devil Ridge cultivators were no longer satisfied with besieging them. They were preparing to enter the myriad poison forest and capture giant armor alive. The reason why they had not taken action was that the number of detoxification pills they needed was too large. They were collecting them from everywhere. Once the detoxification pills were in place, the myriad Devil Ridge would definitely take action. Lu Yi quickly rushed in the direction of the myriad poison forest. He checked the battlefield imprint again. Hua Xi had left a message before, but he did not have time to check it. Hua Xi wanted to return to Ying Mountain and enter the land of inheritance. Lu Yi vaguely sensed that the place she was going to was not very safe. If it was really safe, Hua Xi would have obtained all the inheritances in the land of inheritance. There was no need to delay. He tried to stop her, but he did not succeed, so he did not force it. Later, when he was fighting a battle of wits and courage with the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators in the hidden Fog Mountain, Lu Yi wanted to send a message to Hua Xi to ask about the situation. However, he found that he could not contact Hua Xi. He could only infer from the imprint that she was still alive. Now that Hua Xi took the initiative to send a message, it was obvious that she had left the land of inheritance. He just did not know how she had gained. Yi and giant armor are trapped. I'm on my way. This was Hua Xi's message. Lu Yi hurriedly replied, don't come over. I'm already on my way. Hua Xi quickly replied, you're still alive. Same here. Ha. Lu Ye's eyebrows twitched. What do you mean by, haha? Nothing. Lu Yi wanted to ask her what she meant by nothing. However, considering that if this continued, the conversation would only be endless, he sent a message. Anyway, don't come over first. The situation is not very good. Got it. Be careful. The child can't live without a father. Lu Yi almost lost his mind. This woman was becoming more and more unscrupulous with her words. Chapter 370. Lu Yi even suspected that the reason this overlord-level demoness was so powerful was because she had been absorbing the true phoenix fire's energy all year round. If that was the case, then the true phoenix fire must be fatally attractive to this demoness. Seeing this demoness, Lu Yi immediately activated his wind elemental spirit tattoo to strengthen the spirit boat, increasing its speed by another level. However, the aura chasing after him was rapidly closing in. Lu Yi turned to look, and the corners of his eyes twitched. He saw that the demoness had caught up to him first, running neck to neck with him. She was a bird-type Yao and had the strength of an overlord-level beast. Even if Lu Yi activated his wind elemental spirit tattoo, he couldn't beat her in speed unless he activated his flight wing tattoo. However, his flight wing tattoo's time limit was up, so he couldn't use it anymore. What made Lu Yi feel slightly relieved was that although the demoness had caught up, she didn't seem to have any intention of attacking. That fire, the demoness suddenly said, looking at Lu Yi with her crimson eyes. Lu Ye's heart tightened, and he pressed his hand on the mountain plate saber, waiting for the demoness to ask something he couldn't answer. He had to save Yi and the others, so he didn't have time to waste with this demoness. As for whether he could beat her, the chances were slim, but if he used all his cards, it wouldn't be easy for the demoness to deal with him. I didn't find it. It would be strange if she found it. The true phoenix fire had been swallowed by the talent tree long ago, and there would probably be no more fiery places in the spirit stream battlefield. I didn't see it either, Lu Yi said calmly. Are you mistaken? Impossible. From the beginning to the end, she did not suspect that it was Lu Yi who had destroyed the flame, because in her opinion, Lu Yi was much weaker than her. Even she could not easily obtain the flame, so how could Lu Yi do it? You can't feel it now? The demoness shook her head, looking a little disappointed. Lu Yi thought for a moment, then said, it's like this. There are many treasures in this world that have developed their own spirituality after a long time. Those who are fated can easily obtain them, while those who are unfated can't even see them. Since you're sure there's a fire there, but we didn't see it, maybe we're not fated. Fated? Yes, fated. The demoness fell into deep thought. Her fiery red wings flapped from time to time. It looked like she wasn't using her full strength, but Lu Yi was still unable to shake her off. After thinking for a long time, she suddenly said, is that ball of fire still there? Is it avoiding me? I didn't say anything. The demoness suddenly stopped and turned around to fly towards the land of fire. It looked like she was sure that the ball of fire was still there and was just hiding from her so that she could not see it. Lu Yi sighed as he watched the demoness disappear. The Creator was indeed fair. When he bestowed some things, he would deprive others. With the demoness' intelligence, it was fortunate that she was strong enough. Otherwise, she would have died long ago. The unexpected interlude didn't affect Lu Yi too much. He continued on his way, heading straight for the forest of 1,000 poisons. Judging from the map, it would take him less than 2 days to reach the forest of 1,000 poisons if he flew with the wind travel spiritual tattoo. But without the wind travel spiritual tattoo, it would take him twice as long. It was impossible for Lu Yi to maintain the wind travel spirit rune all the time because doing so would consume too much spirit energy and he wouldn't be able to bear it. If he didn't maintain the wind travel spiritual tattoo, he could barely keep up with the consumption of spirit energy. Even if he consumed more spirit energy, he could still use the rest fruit wine. He continuously stuffed spirit pills into his mouth and refined them. From time to time, he would activate the wind travel spiritual tattoo to increase his speed. At the same time, more than 3,000 cultivators from the myriad demon ridge had gathered around the forest of 1,000 poisons. As time passed, more cultivators continued to gather. In the hidden fog mountain, the failure of the Yi League had already spread. So many people had chased after Lu Yi, but in the end, not only had they failed, but hundreds of them had also died. It was simply unbelievable. This was not a failure of a certain sect. This was the face of the entire myriad demon ridge being trampled on by Lu Yi. It also made the myriad demon ridge completely realize that if they didn't get rid of Lu Yi now, it would really be too late. In the pursuit of Lu Yi in the hidden fog mountain, many first-grade sects and cultivators on the spirit stream list didn't participate because of their status. However, it was different this time. Among the cultivators gathered outside the forest of 1,000 poisons, there were more than 20 cultivators on the spirit stream list. The strongest one was ranked in the 30s. There were even rumors that the top 10 cultivators were hiding in the dark, waiting for Lu Yi to appear so they could give him a fatal blow. This time, there were even more cultivators from the myriad demon ridge than last time. Compared to the pursuit of Lu Yi in the hidden fog mountain, the situation was undoubtedly on the myriad demon ridge's side. The hidden fog mountain was vast and boundless, and the environment was special. If Lu Yi hid inside, it would be difficult to find him. Even if they found him, they might not be his match. However, the forest of 1,000 poisons was different. The forest of 1,000 poisons covered a much smaller area than the hidden fog mountain. The myriad demon ridge had plenty of people and could surround the entire forest of 1,000 poisons. As a result, those who were surrounded would not be able to escape. For example, Giant Armor and Yi, who were currently trapped. As for whether they would continue to hide and not come out, there was no need to worry. The forest of 1,000 poisons was filled with poison. Even if they could hold on for a while, they could not hold on forever. The only result of hiding and not coming out was death from the poison. It was precisely because they realized this that the myriad demon ridge wanted to enter the forest of 1,000 poisons and capture Giant Armor alive. It was not easy to block giant armor, so they could not let him die in the forest of 1,000 poisons. Otherwise, they would not have the capital to restrain sect destroyer Yi. Capturing giant armor alive and forcing Lu Yi to appear was the myriad demon ridge's plan. The detoxification pills and poison-repelling treasures collected from all over the forest of 1,000 poisons were in place. With the cooperation of the various parties of the myriad demon ridge, groups of people entered the forest of 1,000 poisons from all directions to search for giant armor. Soon, news came that a team had encountered giant armor and Lu Yi's white tiger mount. Unfortunately, they were unable to capture him alive and he had escaped. The myriad demon ridge cultivators were in high spirits and continued to suppress giant armor's living space, trying to force him out. During this period, giant armor tried to escape on his artifact several times, but he was beaten back by the myriad demon ridge cultivators who sealed off the sky. For a time, the forest of 1,000 poisons seemed to have become a hopeless situation. News that made the myriad demon ridge even more excited came. Lu Yi had appeared. He was less than half a day's journey away from the forest of 1,000 poisons and was rushing over. When the news spread, the myriad demon ridge was overjoyed, knowing that their previous plan had worked. Immediately, many cultivators retreated from the forest of 1,000 poisons and stood guard outside the forest. They set up many traps and waited for Lu Yi to walk into the trap. There were even more impatient ones who directly approached Lu Yi, clearly wanting to kill him. Only half a day's journey away from the forest of 1,000 poisons, Lu Yi was flying on his artifact with a stream of light following behind him. If he rushed over so openly, his whereabouts would inevitably be exposed. Moreover, he had never thought of hiding his whereabouts. He knew very well what the myriad demon ridge's plan was. He did not know how Yi and giant armor were doing. When he asked, Yi only said that everything was fine. Obviously, she was not telling the truth. Now that he was attracting some myriad demon ridge cultivators here, the pressure on Yi and the others in the forest of 1,000 poisons would be less. There were dozens of myriad demon ridge cultivators following behind him. Just like when they were being chased previously, there were constantly people falling behind and people joining the ranks of the pursuers. Lu Yi did not intend to be entangled with them. Right now, his spirit energy was precious and it was not good to waste it here. As he chased, he swept past a forest. Suddenly, Lu Yi sensed something and looked down. What entered his eyes was a burst of sword light. The endless sword light gathered into a sword dragon and attacked the pursuers behind him with cold killing intent. Along with the sword light that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, there were also more than 10 figures dressed in plain clothes. Beixian Sword Sect. Someone among the myriad demon ridge cultivators who were chasing Lu Yi shouted in panic. Lu Yi immediately stopped and changed direction to kill the pursuers behind him. Before he arrived, 9 streams of light shot out from the weapon box. Previously, he was unwilling to be entangled with the pursuers because he was alone. Even if he could kill some of them, it would be difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. However, it was different now that he had help. Moreover, the helpers were more than 10 sword maniacs who were known for their killing. Sword light surged and exploded, and miserable screams were heard continuously. Although there were many myriad demon ridge cultivators chasing after them, they were still afraid of the Beixian sword sect's sword maniacs. One had to know that these sword maniacs' sword control technique was known as the #1 killing technique in the 9 prefectures. Moreover, Lu Yi was also involved. Compared to the Beixian sword sect's sword cultivators, Lu Yi's killing speed was not slow at all. After a hasty exchange of blows, there were many casualties. Only a dozen people managed to escape in time, and all of them were injured. The rest were all killed on the spot. Being ambushed by a group of sword maniacs was definitely not a good ending. With a clang, 9 streams of light flew into the weapon box. Lu Yi shook off the blood on the mountain pan saber and sheathed it. He looked at the sword cultivator in the lead. He actually knew him. On top of the golden light, Li Baxian had instructed this person to protect Lu Ye. However, this person's cultivation was not very high at that time, but now, he was in the 9 heavens realm. Lu Ye remembered that this person's name was Yu Lianzhou. Greetings, Uncle Master Lu. Yu Lianzhou bowed solemnly, and so did the 10-odd sword cultivators behind him. Lu Ye hurriedly raised his hand to stop them. Don't call me Uncle Master, you're making me sound old. I'm not as old as you guys. In terms of seniority, Li Baxian was 1 generation higher than them. Li Baxian was Lu Ye's 4th senior brother, so it was not strange that they would address Lu Yi as Uncle Master. In fact, there were only a few cultivators in the entire Spirit Stream battlefield who were of the same generation as Lu Yi. Back when Shuiyuan went to the main sect of the Heaven Expanse sect, the sect master of the Heaven Expanse sect, Yu Shao, even addressed Shuiyuan as senior sister. Cultivators had long lifespans, so most of the time, seniority was not easy to calculate. Unless they were on very good terms with each other, they would address each other as senior brother. You guys are related to my 4th senior brother, so it's not appropriate for us to address each other as fellow Taoists. Fellow Taoist Lu, Yu Lianzhou said. Why are you guys here? Lu Ye asked. It was clearly not a coincidence that he would run into these sword cultivators here. Chapter 371. If Wanmo Ridge could see that Lu Yi was a huge threat to them and wanted to get rid of him, how could Haotian Alliance not see it? To Wanmo Ridge, Lu Yi was a jinx and the source of chaos. However, to Haotian Alliance, Lu Yi was a rising star of the younger generation and a mainstay to fight against Wanmo Ridge in the future. Their attitudes towards people and things were naturally different due to their different standpoints. If Wanmo Ridge wanted to kill, Haotian Alliance would protect. Since ancient times, the confrontation between the 2 camps had always been like this. No one would easily go along with the other's wishes. Not only did Beixian Sword Sect send people, but many sects in the core region also sent people. However, Haotian Alliance did not know where Lu Yi would come from, so they spread out and waited. If Lu Yi came from this direction, he would encounter Beixian Sword Sect. If he came from another direction, he might encounter Vitality Sect, Green Jade Sect, or even Baiyun Palace. Beixian Sword Sect was very strict in accepting disciples. Among all the first-grade sects in the entire 9 states, this sect had the least number of disciples. In the core region, there were only a few dozen cultivators in Beixian Sword Sect's encampment. More than 10 people were sent out at once, which showed how important Lu Yi was. Li Baxian must be one of the reasons. Taoist Lu, you can't go to the forest of 1,000 poisons. Wanmo Ridge has set up many traps there and is only waiting for you to walk into the trap. Someone from Jade Blood Sect is trapped there. I heard that. Even if you want to go, you can't go now. You have to gather people first. Wanmo Ridge has the upper hand now. There are thousands of Wanmo Ridge cultivators gathered there. Without enough people, it will be difficult to break through their defense line. We can't wait. The environment inside is terrible. My Jade Blood Sect's disciples have been trapped there for several days. If we delay any longer, I'm afraid they will die. Lu Yi turned to look at Yu Lianzhou. If Beixian Sword Sect's disciples are trapped there, what will you do? Yu Lianzhou pondered for a moment. I understand. Then we will go with you. I am very grateful for your kindness. However, it will be dangerous. You don't have to go deep into the forest of 1,000 poisons. Taoist, you want to go alone? Yu Lianzhou understood what Lu Yi meant. I might be able to break through their defense line and enter the forest of 1,000 poisons. Perhaps? I've never tried it before, so I'm not sure. However, I'll still have to trouble you all to send me off. My whereabouts have been exposed, and many people from the Myriad Devil Ridge will probably come to intercept me. I need to recover for a while and maintain my spiritual power. But fellow Taoist Lu, even if you do have the means to break through their defensive line and enter the forest of 1,000 poisons, what can you do? That place is filled with poisonous miasma and is a place of great danger. If you can't escape, you'll eventually die there. I have my own plans. Please rest assured, fellow Taoist. Yu Lianzhou looked at him with a frown, not knowing if he was telling the truth. Lu Yi smiled. I cherish my life more than any of you. Only then did Yu Lianzhou nod his head. Then we'll do as you say. However, if things are impossible, don't force yourself. Understood. Go. With a low shout, Yu Lianzhou flew up on his flying sword. Lu Yi stepped onto his flying sword, and the group of more than 10 people turned into streaks of sword light as they flew towards the forest of 1,000 poisons. Lu Yi was previously worried about the endurance of his spiritual power. Now that Yu Lianzhou was carrying him on his flying sword, he could rest assured and recover his spiritual power. He stuffed a large number of spirit pills into his mouth and activated the gluttonous meal. His stomach buzzed non-stop, and his spiritual power quickly recovered. Along the way, there were many Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators who received the message and rushed over to gather. There were also myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who came to kill Lu Yi. However, after a few groups were wiped out, those myriad Devil Ridge cultivators didn't dare to come over and act presumptuously. They didn't even dare to follow from afar. This was because sword cultivators were very fast on their flying swords. Once they were targeted by the North Mystery Sword Sect's sword maniacs, there was a high chance that they wouldn't be able to escape. Gradually, more and more people from the Grand Heaven Alliance gathered. Soon, there were more than 200 people. However, just as Yu Lianzhou had said before, the myriad Devil Ridge had the upper hand this time. They had gathered more people than the Grand Sky Alliance. Therefore, the Grand Sky Alliance would not be able to gather too many people in a short time. He originally wanted to persuade Lu Yi to wait a few more days for the Grand Heaven Alliance to gather enough people before going to war with the myriad Devil Ridge. However, he didn't succeed in persuading him. Normally, waiting a few more days wouldn't be a problem. However, in the current situation, neither Lu Yi nor Giant Armor could wait. Moreover, even if the Grand Heaven Alliance gathered enough people, they would at most be in a confrontation with the myriad Devil Ridge. A confrontation with thousands of people usually wouldn't result in a battle because there were too many people. Once a battle broke out, both sides would suffer heavy casualties. This was unbearable for either side. Just like in the inner circle, the myriad Devil Ridge gathered a similar number of cultivators to deal with the Grand Heaven Alliance army that Lu Yi had pulled out. In the past, the two factions wouldn't have such a large-scale operation. No one wanted to force the other side to fight to the death. However, ever since Lu Yi caused a storm in the inner circle, this kind of large-scale gathering of cultivators seemed to have become the norm. On Lianzhou's spirit sword, Lu Ye's spirit power had become abundant, but he was still somewhat uncertain. The Fire Phoenix spirit pattern that required 1 to 200 leaves was extremely complicated to construct. However, with the talent tree, Lu Yi wasn't worried that the construction would fail. The only thing that worried him was that the spirit power consumed during the construction of this spirit pattern would be extremely large. With Lu Ye's current cultivation level, he might not be able to construct it. If his spirit power was exhausted during the construction process, the scene was simply unimaginable. Consuming aura fruit wine while constructing the spirit pattern was a solution, but there was no guarantee that he would be able to replenish it in time. The best solution was to quickly increase his spirit power reserves. However, how could spirit power reserves be increased so easily? If he wanted to increase his spirit power reserves, he had to open more apertures. Even if Lu Ye's aperture opening speed was very fast, it would be difficult to achieve results in a short period of time. Lu Yi thought of a spirit pattern. Spirit storage. This spirit pattern was specially used to store spirit power. Every imperial artifact had a barrier built with spirit storage as the core. Otherwise, after the imperial artifact left the body, it would be impossible to use it. The key to imperial artifact manipulation for cultivators was that after their cultivation reached the 7th order, they would be able to control their spirit power and store it in their imperial artifact in advance. By controlling the stored spirit power, they could achieve the purpose of imperial artifact manipulation. If he could use the spirit storage to store a large amount of spirit power, he would undoubtedly be able to solve the problem he had to face. The spirit-gathering spirit pattern could enhance his body, the blood-stained spirit pattern could also enhance his body, so naturally, the spirit storage spirit pattern could also enhance his body. Thinking of this, Lu Yi immediately urged his spirit power to construct a spirit storage spirit pattern on his chest. Immediately, he urged his spirit power and poured it into the spirit storage spirit pattern to store it. The spirit storage spirit pattern itself required spirit power to maintain, and injecting one's spirit power into it like this was another consumption. What's more, the impact of the injection of spirit power could cause the spirit pattern to collapse. This was undoubtedly a huge test for Lu Yi. Fortunately, his soul was tough enough, his mind strong enough, and his control over his spirit power was smooth. As his spirit power slowly poured into the spirit storage spirit pattern, Lu Yi slowly adapted, and the spirit pattern showed no signs of collapsing. After confirming that his idea was feasible, Lu Yi took out a spirit pill and swallowed it, then drank a bottle of fruit wine to supplement his consumption. As time passed, Yu Lianzhou suddenly looked back at Lu Yi. He vaguely felt that there was something wrong with Lu Yi behind him. From Lu Ye's body, he could sense a dangerous aura. It wasn't that Lu Yi was trying to sneak attack him, but rather that Lu Yi himself was like a balloon that was about to burst, his spiritual energy fluctuations becoming extremely unstable. Not only did he feel it, but the other cultivators who were nearby also noticed it and looked over. At this moment, the spirit storage spirit pattern on Lu Ye's chest had reached its limit and could no longer store any more spirit energy. Feeling it a little, the spirit energy stored in this spirit pattern was equivalent to about 30% of his total reserves. Since his spirit was still extremely abundant, Lu Yi simply constructed the same spirit storage spirit pattern on his back. Repeating the same process. With previous experience, it was much simpler this time. If Lu Ye's spiritual energy reserve could be compared to a pool, then he had dug 2 connected small pools on the side of the pool. The total amount of spiritual energy stored in these 2 small pools was about 60% of his spiritual energy. Lu Yi continued until he felt that the spirit energy stored should be enough, then he stopped. At this time, there were as many as 5 pools in his body. The corner of Yu Lianzhou's eyes had already twitched, and his keen perception allowed him to clearly perceive the crisis from behind. If Lu Yi was like a balloon that was about to burst before, then now he was a volcano that could erupt at any time. He didn't know what Lu Yi was doing, but he was sure that fellow Taoist Lu was doing something unusual, and it was a very dangerous thing. Fellow Taoist Yu, please speed up. Lu Ye's voice suddenly came from behind. Previously, in order to wait for the reinforcements from the Haotian alliance, Yu Lianzhou's flying speed was not fast because in his understanding, it was better to have more people. Even if the people gathered now were like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, it was better to gather as many people as possible. As for Lu Ye's previous statement that he might be able to break through the defense line of the Wanmo Ridge and enter the Forest of 1,000 Poisons, Yu Lianzhou didn't care. There was a limit to human strength. Even if Lu Ye's previous performance was monstrous, facing so many cultivators from the Wanmo Ridge, it was difficult for him to do it alone. While rushing forward, he had already discussed with the other cultivators from the Haotian alliance that came to join them. They would charge together and try their best to tear through the defense line of the Wanmo Ridge, then enter the Forest of 1,000 Poisons. If it really couldn't be done, then they would retreat and plan slowly. They could understand Lu Ye's feelings of wanting to go deep into the Forest of 1,000 Poisons to save their cultivators, so they were willing to take this risk with Lu Yi. However, when he felt the strong crisis behind him, Yu Lianzhou had a little confidence in Lu Ye's previous statement that he might be able to break through the defense line of the Wanmo Ridge. This method had not been used yet, and it was already so shocking. If it was used, what kind of scene would it be? Chapter 372. Outside the forest of 1,000 poisons, the myriad Demon Ridge cultivators looked solemn as they waited. Messages kept coming in from all sides, so the myriad Demon Ridge knew Lu Ye's movements like the back of their hand. Senior Brother Wu, Lu Ye is already 100 miles away. He'll be here soon. Qin Zheng from the Thousand Feather sect walked up to a man. The man he addressed as Senior Brother Wu was Wu Beihan, who was ranked 33rd on the Spirit Stream list. He came from a first-grade sect and was much stronger than Qin Zheng. Qin Zheng had led the Hidden Fog Mountains' pursuit of Lu Yi, but they had suffered heavy losses and humiliated him and the Thousand Feather sect. Now, the Myriad Demon Ridge had sent out a lot of experts. There were more than 10 Spirit Stream list experts here, so Qin Zheng naturally didn't have the authority to give orders. How many people are with him? Wu Beihan looked in the direction Lu Yi had come from. 100 miles was very close to the core region cultivators. They would probably arrive in less than an incense stick's worth of time. About 300 or 400. Only 300 or 400. Wu Beihan snorted. There's nothing to be afraid of. The Myriad Demon Ridge had gathered 3,000 or 4,000 people here. Although they wanted to surround the forest of 1,000 poisons and had spread out a lot of people, there were still more than 700 people in this direction. The Grand Sky Alliance had only sent 300 or 400 people, so it was undoubtedly suicidal. Qin Zheng wanted to remind Wu Beihan not to underestimate the enemy, but on second thought, he realized that the difference in numbers between them and the enemy was close to double. It was impossible for the Myriad Demons Ridge to lose this battle no matter what. Thus, he did not say anything, lest he be ridiculed for being a coward. Because of the Hidden Fog Mountains' defeat, he had been blamed by many people openly and secretly. They said that it was his mistake that caused the Myriad Demon Ridge to suffer heavy losses and lose face. But in fact, in such an environment, he had been ordered to do so. How could he have made a good decision? The entire Hidden Fog Mountain was almost led by the nose by Lu Yi. Wu Beihan was undoubtedly a steady person. Even if his side had the advantage in numbers and said there was nothing to be afraid of, he still carefully ordered people to check the surrounding arrangements. They had set up many formations in this area. Some people had even bought spirit tools from the Tianji treasure house to capture people. It was a spirit tool that looked like a large net. It required several people to work together to cast it. It was usually used to capture some large and troublesome demonic beasts. Every spirit net was extremely valuable, but in order to deal with Lu Ye, the Myriad Demon Ridge had bought over a dozen spirit nets. If Lu Ye didn't show up, then it would be fine, but if he did, then he wouldn't be able to escape. Wu Beihan then looked at a certain spot in the crowd. There was a small cultivator with an ordinary appearance. He was the type that no one would look at if he was thrown into a crowd. The spirit light on the surface of his body was only at the Heavenly 8 level. However, very few of the cultivators from the Myriad Devil's Ridge knew that this person was a ghost cultivator ranked 9th on the Spirit Stream list, Ghost Shadow. It was no secret that Lu Yi had been able to kill a Heaven rank 9 cultivator with his Heaven rank 7 cultivation base. Thus, if they really wanted to deal with Lu Yi, the ghost cultivator's ambush would undoubtedly be a sharp blade to look forward to. And as the strongest ghost cultivator in the Spirit Stream battlefield, Ghost Shadow's arrival filled Wu Beihan with confidence in this operation. Everything was ready. Hundreds of cultivators held their breaths, waiting for the people of Haotian Alliance to show up. Time passed. Until a certain moment, someone whispered, "They're here." At the end of their field of vision, a large number of flowing lights rushed over. They were the cultivators of Haotian Alliance who were escorting Lu Yi. Leading them were more than a dozen sword cultivators from the Beixian sword sect. The Myriad Devil's Ridge was in an uproar. Hundreds of cultivators from Haotian Alliance brazenly rushed over, which undoubtedly made them feel underestimated. At the same time, they were puzzled. What was Haotian Alliance trying to do? These people were all cultivators from the core circle. There was no reason for them to be so stupid. In the distance, in the Haotian Alliance's camp, Yu Lianzhou looked in the direction of the myriad poison forest and said in a deep voice, "Brother Lu, there are still 20 miles left." "Got it." Lu Yi, who had been sitting cross-legged behind Yu Lianzhou, slowly stood up and said in a clear voice, "Brother Lu, thank you for protecting me along the way. Leave the rest to me. Please act according to the situation." A cultivator from Tianzhou laughed. "Brother Yi, I don't know what you're going to do, but the Myriad Devil's Ridge is very powerful now. It'll be difficult for you to do it alone. Since we're here, we're not afraid to go with you. However, I'll say this first. If you can't do it, you still have to run. Where there's life, there's hope, Brother Yi." "Yes, yes, yes, 10 miles. Yu Lianzhou shouted. From his position, he could already feel the spiritual power fluctuations from the cultivators of the Myriad Devil's Ridge. Lu Yi summoned his spirit boat and jumped down from Yu Lianzhou's flying sword. As he raised his hand and drank a bottle of resting fruit wine that he had prepared, the spirit boat shook slightly and rushed to the front. In the next instant, under the gazes of thousands of people from both sides, Lu Ye's body was suddenly shrouded by a dark red spiritual power. Rich spiritual power flowed, gushed, and gathered, turning into the shape of an egg and tightly wrapped around Lu Yi. Violent spiritual power fluctuations spread in all directions. On the surface of the egg, various mysterious patterns rapidly evolved, dazzling the eyes. The group of people from the Grand Sky Alliance had long felt that Lu Yi was holding back some powerful technique. At this moment, they naturally opened their eyes wide to see clearly. However, they were confused. Because no one could see what Lu Yi was doing. Similarly, the cultivators of the Myriad Devil's Ridge were confused. Lu Yi suddenly rushed out and used his spiritual power to condense into the shape of an egg. His entire body was hiding inside. Looking at his posture, it seemed like he wanted to force his way out. But so what if he protected himself so tightly? With more than 700 cultivators from the core circle attacking together, even a true lake stage cultivator would have to think twice. The tide-like spiritual power crazily surged. The patterns on the spirit energy egg that wrapped around Lu Yi became increasingly clear and flashed with a dazzling luster. The spiritual power stored in the spirit storage rune on his chest was completely consumed in less than 3 breaths of time. Then, it was the spiritual power stored in the second spirit storage rune, followed by the spiritual power stored in the other spirit storage runes, and finally, the spiritual power flowing in Lu Ye's spirit apertures. There had never been a time when Lu Ye's spiritual power consumption was so severe. Outsiders could only see the various changes on the surface of the spirit energy egg, but in reality, there were even more changes inside the spirit energy egg. The fragments of spirit runes contained in 1 or 200 talent tree leaves were constructed by Lu Yi in an extremely short period of time using a huge amount of spiritual power and then pieced together. Not only did it consume spiritual power, it also consumed the power of the mind. The Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators behind Lu Yi were the first to sense that something was wrong because the spirit energy egg that wrapped around Lu Yi was emitting an extremely dangerous aura that made their skin prickle. Under Lianzhou's lead, the Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators, who originally planned to charge into the myriad poison forest with Lu Yi, stopped in their tracks. The corners of their eyes twitched as they stared at the spiritual power egg that was rapidly approaching the Myriad Devil's Ridge's camp. They didn't dare to continue following. Although they didn't see what technique Lu Yi was using, it was obviously a very powerful and dangerous technique. Once it was used, it was very likely that they would be accidentally injured. Thinking back to what Lu Yi said before, the Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators finally understood where his confidence came from. At this moment, they were only 3 miles away from the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. Even so, they were rapidly closing in. The Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators finally realized that something was wrong because the surface of the approaching spirit energy egg was scorching red as if it was about to explode. Even though they were a few miles away, the terrifying aura made their hair stand on end. Wu Beihan stared fixedly at the spirit energy egg. The surging warning in his heart told him to escape from this place as soon as possible, but his dignity as a cultivator made him unable to move. Hundreds of people were facing one person. If he escaped like this, what would happen? He didn't notice that Ghost Shadow, who was in the crowd, had already concealed himself and ran somewhere. A powerful ghost cultivator like Ghost Shadow was extremely sensitive to danger. The horror of an impending disaster made him not dare to stay here any longer. 1 mile, Wu Beihan shouted angrily, kill. As soon as he finished speaking, many formations were activated. Spells and artifacts blotted out the sky and covered the earth as they bombarded the oncoming spiritual energy eggs. Not only that, but there were also cultivators who flew into the sky on their artifacts, and many spiritual nets flew towards the spiritual energy eggs. Kacha, cracks appeared on the surface of the scorching red spirit energy egg. The moment it shattered, a clear and loud cry suddenly resounded through the world. Orange flames swept in all directions, and a huge firebird appeared out of thin air. The firebird was more than 30 meters long, with long feathers trailing behind it. Its wingspan was nearly 60 meters. Its posture was graceful, and its expression was vivid. The patterns of feathers covering its body were clearly visible, as if it was a living creature. Its wings flapped, and everywhere it passed, the space was scorched and distorted. Many attacking spells hit its body, but they were like stones sinking into the sea. Many flying artifacts lost their spirituality in an instant, and their restrictions were all destroyed. They melted and fell to the ground. The dozen or so spirit nets that covered it couldn't stop its graceful movements. On this day, a divine bird appeared, and the world was shocked. All the cultivators who saw this scene looked at the huge firebird with dazed and trembling eyes. The 4 sacred beasts, vermilion bird. Yu Yanzhou murmured. Even though he was an extremely outstanding sword cultivator, his sword heart was shaken at this moment, and his scalp was numb. He had only read about the 4 sacred beasts in the sect's records, but he had never seen it with his own eyes. Today, he saw it with his own eyes. He felt a lingering fear. If he hadn't reacted quickly and stopped following Lu Yi, his side would have suffered heavy losses when the vermilion bird appeared. Not only him, but all the cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance were also terrified. They all guessed that Lu Yi was going to use a powerful technique, but now they knew that it was too powerful. Moreover, what technique was this? Even the 4 sacred beasts were summoned. Of course, everyone knew that these weren't the real 4 sacred beasts. The real 4 sacred beasts would probably only need to flap their wings to destroy the entire spirit stream battlefield. These were only condensed by Lu Yi with his own spiritual power. The key question was, could a spirit stream cultivator use such a technique? Chapter 373. More than 7 million cultivators from the Devil Ridge's core region were gathered in this direction. There were many formations and spirit weapons in the sky and on the ground, sealing the area tightly. Such a line of defense could not be said to be weak. However, when the vermilion bird's figure swept past, this solid line of defense was easily torn apart like paper. The cultivators from the Devil Ridge who were pulling the spirit net to cover the vermilion bird were the first to bear the brunt. Before they could completely get close, their clothes and hair were burned, and their protective spirit power did not have the slightest effect. At this moment, they finally realized that a great disaster was about to befall them. They wanted to turn around and run, but it was already too late. The vermilion bird's wings flapped slightly, and its slender and elegant figure crossed the barrier of space, enveloping them in orange-red flames. Screams rang out, and figures fell down like raindrops, dying on the spot before they completely landed. More and more cultivators from the Devil Ridge were engulfed by the orange-red flames. Even the powerful cultivators on the spirit stream list were as weak as ants in front of such means. The dense formation was originally to better deal with the charging formation of the Grand Sky Alliance, but at this moment, it became the biggest failure. The vermilion bird's figure swept past the most concentrated place of the crowd, and the scorching power plowed out a death zone in the air and on the ground as it crashed into the forest of 1,000 poisons. Its power did not diminish, and the poisonous miasma that pervaded the forest of 1,000 poisons all year round was cleared out. Wherever the vermilion bird passed, the poisonous miasma disappeared without a trace. Looking down from the sky, outside the forest of 1,000 poisons, the originally tight line of defense of the Devil Ridge now had a gap that was hundreds of feet wide. There was no one in the gap, and on both sides of the gap were the horrified cultivators of the Devil Ridge. Pairs of eyes trembled as they looked at the orange-red figure that crashed into the forest of 1,000 poisons. They were able to survive not because they were strong enough, but because they were lucky enough not to be affected by the huge figure. As for the myriad demons' rich cultivators who were affected, all of them were charred black and had lost all their vitality. In just a dozen breaths of time, more than 200 cultivators of the Devil Ridge had been killed or injured. Even a few cultivators on the spirit stream list had died, including Wu Beihan, who was ranked 33rd. After all, he was the strongest person on the surface, so the moment the vermilion bird appeared, he did not choose to hide or escape. Instead, he ordered the cultivators around him to attack. However, he underestimated the strength of the fire phoenix. When the orange figure rushed in front of him, it was already too late to run. He left peacefully. The clear and resonant cry rang out once again. After the vermilion bird crashed into the myriad poisons forest for several miles, it suddenly collapsed and turned into specks of fluorescent light. Amidst the dancing fluorescent lights in the sky, a figure fell straight down. "It's Lu Ye!" A myriad Devil Ridge cultivator exclaimed in a trembling voice. The vermilion bird of the 4 sacred beasts was created by Lu Yi. Now that the vermilion bird was gone, Lu Ye's figure was naturally revealed. But looking at his current situation, it seemed, he wasn't doing very well. "He's not going to make it," someone shouted in surprise. More than 200 cultivators from the core circle of Myriad Demons Ridge were killed by such a shocking method. Specks of red light drifted out of the corpses and converged into a belt of light, drifting towards the place where Lu Yi landed. But was this really something that a spirit stream stage cultivator could casually use? At this level of cultivation, who didn't understand the principle that the stronger the means, the greater the price? Although they didn't know why Lu Yi was able to use such a method, he was undoubtedly an arrow at the end of its flight. Perhaps he had even suffered a great backlash. Right now, he was definitely at his weakest. This could be seen from his sorry figure falling down. The boundless fear just now was suddenly replaced by great surprise. All the Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators saw that this was an opportunity. A chance to kill Lu Yi. Lu Yi of the Jade Blood sect was a moving treasure trove. Whoever killed him would be able to enjoy endless wealth in the future. Therefore, after a short pause, all the surviving Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators became excited. However, before they could rush into the Myriad Poisons forest to search for Lu Yi, the sound of swords suddenly rang out. Someone shouted, "The Grand Heaven Alliance is here." The Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators who were attracted by Lu Yi turned their heads to look. More than 10 sword lunatics from the North Profound Sword sect formed a sword formation. Their flying swords were like dragons as they attacked this side. Behind these sword lunatics were 300 to 400 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators. The appearance of the vermilion bird was indeed shocking. However, the Grand Heaven Alliance wasn't the one being attacked after all. Therefore, they came back to their senses before the Myriad Demons Ridge. Yu Yanzhou and the others immediately realized that this was a good opportunity to attack the Myriad Demons Ridge. When the vermilion bird's figure crashed into the Myriad Poisons forest, they launched an attack on the panicked enemy. A huge battle suddenly broke out. There were thousands of Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators gathered inside and outside the Myriad Poisons forest. There were more than 700 people in this direction. Even though some of them had died just now, the Myriad Demons Ridge still had the advantage in terms of numbers. However, sword cultivators were the best at killing. Especially when more than 10 sword cultivators formed a huge sword formation, their killing power increased greatly. The sword dragon formed by thousands of flying swords crashed into the crowd and immediately turned into a sharp weapon that minced flesh. Screams rose and fell continuously as blood and broken limbs flew everywhere. Immediately after this sword formation, more than 300 Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators used various methods to kill the myriad demons Ridge cultivators. If the previous arrangements were still there, the myriad demons Ridge could still rely on them to turn the situation around. However, when the vermilion bird's figure swept past this area, all the arrays and methods set up in advance were destroyed. At this moment, the only thing the myriad demons Ridge could rely on was their advantage in numbers. This small advantage couldn't stop the Grand Heaven Alliance's attack at all. Under the pressure, the myriad demons Ridge couldn't resist for a while. It wasn't until a group of cultivators heard the commotion and came to help that the momentum of the Grand Heaven Alliance's attack was stopped. The hundreds of people from the Grand Heaven Alliance didn't linger in the battle. After taking advantage of the situation, they immediately ran away. The myriad demons Ridge chased after them vigorously. Just as the two sides were fighting, Lu Yi was dashing in the myriad poisons forest with blood all over his body. His aura was weak. He only felt that his consciousness was blurry at this moment. He was exhausted, and his spiritual power was almost dried up. If he hadn't drunk a bottle of resting fruit wine before using the fire phoenix, he would have been exhausted. Countless wounds appeared on his skin, and even the flesh inside his body was damaged. He secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, he had stored a lot of spiritual power with the 5 spirit storage spirit runes. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to use the fire phoenix this time. This spirit rune was too taxing on his spiritual power and mind. It wasn't something a cultivator of his level could use. Although he successfully used it in the end, the fire phoenix constructed wasn't under his control at all. Otherwise, he wouldn't have rushed into the myriad poisons forest and would have killed the hundreds of myriad demons Ridge cultivators there. Not long after he crashed into the myriad poisons forest, the fire phoenix collapsed. It wasn't that its power was exhausted, but that he couldn't hold on anymore. If he held on any longer, Lu Yi felt that he would die. If he wanted to easily construct this huge spirit rune and control it perfectly, Lu Yi estimated that he would have to reach the Cloud River realm for it to be possible, but it was just a possibility. The resting fruit wine continued to work, and the spiritual power he consumed was quickly replenished. However, the after effects of using the fire phoenix were quickly showing. He didn't dare to stay in place because there were traces of myriad demons Ridge cultivators in the myriad poisons forest. His figure was so obvious when he fell just now, so someone must have come to find him. If he encountered a cultivator from the myriad demons Ridge at this time, Lu Yi estimated that he wouldn't have a good ending. The strength he could display now would be greatly reduced. Fortunately, he had already sent a message to Yi in advance, and Yi was guiding the giant armor toward him. Moreover, the myriad poisons forest was filled with poisonous miasma, blocking one's vision. It wouldn't be easy for the cultivators from the myriad demons Ridge to find him in such an environment. As long as he was careful enough, there shouldn't be too much of a problem. Just as he was thinking about this, a heavenly secret suddenly descended from the heavens. Following that, a huge translucent list appeared in the sky above his head. The list was engraved with the names and backgrounds of 100 people. It was the famous spirit stream list. Lu Yi, who was running away, stiffened. The situation didn't seem too good. Lu Yi naturally had some understanding of the spirit stream list. According to her 4th senior brother, cultivators who made it onto the spirit stream list for the first time would be able to sense the omnipresent fate of heaven. If one's performance was outstanding enough, the fate of heaven would have a unique way of highlighting the person who made it onto the list. It could be considered a form of recognition and reward from the fate of heaven. However, since ancient times, there weren't many people who were truly recognized and rewarded by the heavenly secret. According to the proportion of people on the list, it was 1 in 10,000. Such a person would only appear once every few years. While Lu Yi was still thinking about carefully concealing his whereabouts, the translucent spiritual stream list suddenly unfurled above his head like a flag. As long as one was not blind, they should be able to see the list within a radius of 100 miles. It couldn't be, how could it be? Under the gazes of countless people, 5 names on the spirit stream list suddenly dimmed, before turning into fluorescent light and dissipating. This meant that these 5 people had either advanced to the Cloud River realm or died. At the 33rd position, a row of golden words suddenly appeared. Lui Ye, Force Province's Jade Blood Sect, 7th Order Heaven Grade. Immediately after that, everyone below the 33rd position was moved up by 1 position. At the empty position at the end of the list, there were a few more lines of words, indicating the names, origins, and cultivation of the new people on the list. The huge spirit stream list hung high in the sky. At this moment, all the cultivators within 100 kilometers could clearly see it. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the 33rd row of words, especially the last 5 words. 7th Order Heaven Grade. How dazzling! Since ancient times, the masters on the spirit stream list were all at the 9th Order Heaven Grade. Only in the past decade or so did Li Baxian appear, occupying the top 10 positions with his 8th Order Heaven Grade cultivation. However, Li Baxian was different. He had fallen from the 9th Order Heaven Grade. Even if he had opened a spirit aperture, his foundation was still there. Furthermore, his talent was extraordinary, allowing him to control 100 swords. Even the Northern Profound Sword Sect's sword master had thought of accepting him as a disciple. Tian Qi's cultivation being on the spirit stream list was unprecedented. Chapter 374. The Spirit Stream List was a list created by the mysteries of the heavens. There were countless cultivators in the Spirit Stream battlefield, but the list only had 100 names. One could imagine how difficult it was to get onto the list. After so many years, the cultivators of the 9 prefectures had long since figured out the rules of the Spirit Stream List. There were 2 ways to get onto the list. The first way was to fight in front of others and display one's strength. If one's strength was strong enough, they would be included in the Spirit Stream List and be placed in a suitable position. Therefore, as long as one's strength was strong enough, they would definitely be able to get onto the list. Of course, if a cultivator wanted to hide their strength and never show it in front of others, even if they had the qualifications, the list would not include them. Take Li Baxian as an example. When Lu Yi first met him, he was ranked 10th on the Spirit Stream list. At that time, he had been hiding his strength, as he had never shown it in front of others. It was only after the battle at the Golden Light Summit, when he had agreed to fight with Yan Xing, that he had revealed his strength. The Spirit Stream list had been adjusted in time, moving him from 10th place to 3rd place. Previously, when Li Baxian's spiritual aperture had been completely repaired, he had used his Tianjiu cultivation to kill Yan Xing outside the Wild Blade sect's encampment. Thus, he had jumped from 3rd place to 1st place. According to the mysteries of the heavens, the strength he had displayed had already surpassed Feng Yuechan's. The other way was to challenge those on the Spirit Stream list. The mysteries of the heavens had a set of rules and methods for challenges. If those who were not on the list succeeded in their challenge or killed their opponents, they would replace those on the list. There were many benefits for cultivators who got onto the Spirit Stream list. Those benefits were bestowed by the mysteries of the heavens, and were extremely beneficial to their cultivation. It was because of those benefits that many cultivators with strong foundations were unwilling to reach the Cloud River realm, even if they had a Tianjiu cultivation. They stayed in the Spirit Stream battlefield mainly for the Spirit Stream list. If they could get onto the Spirit Stream list and obtain the benefits bestowed by the mysteries of the heavens before reaching the Cloud River realm, their future potential would be even greater. When cultivators reached Tianjiu cultivation, the difference in their foundations would slowly be revealed. Even cultivators with the same cultivation base would have differences in strength. Lu Yi had killed quite a few Heaven Tier 9 cultivators recently. However, if he were to face off against an expert on the spirit stream list, it was hard to say who would emerge victorious. That was because the power he had displayed so far was not enough for him to enter the spirit stream list. That was Heavencraft's fair judgment. Until now. The Fire Phoenix had killed over 200 cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge in one fell swoop. Among them, there were as many as 5 people on the spirit stream list. The one with the highest ranking was Wu Beihan, who was ranked 33rd. According to the rules of the spirit stream list, Lu Yi had killed Wu Beihan, so it didn't matter what method he had used to take his place. In truth, the terrifying power displayed by the Fire Phoenix was something that even the number 1 person on the spirit stream list would not be able to take on. Logically speaking, Lu Yi should have been able to reach the number 1 spot on the spirit stream list. But Tianji's judgment had its own set of criteria. Perhaps he felt that Lu Ye's method was opportunistic, so he only allowed him to take Wu Beihan's place. After all, under normal circumstances, Lu Yi wouldn't have the chance to use this spirit pattern in a fight. He wouldn't even have enough spirit energy, so how could he use it? The reason why he was able to cast it successfully this time was because he had prepared ahead of time. He had used 2 spirit storage spirit inscriptions to store 60% of his spirit energy in advance. When he was in a real battle, he would not have the time to do such things. At this very moment, on the huge list, there was a Heaven Grade 9th Master mixed in with a Heaven Grade 7th Master. Furthermore, he occupied the 33rd position, shining so brightly that it almost blinded the eyes of cultivators from both sides. No one had ever been able to rank so high on the spirit stream list. The majority of cultivators had climbed up from the bottom of the spirit stream list step by step. Something unprecedented had happened right before everyone's eyes. This matter was quickly spread to the 9 continents through various cultivators' messages. In just a short moment, all the cultivators in the 9 continents knew about this matter. The 9 continents were shaken. Not only was Lu Yi, with his Heaven Grade 7th Master cultivation, able to reach the 33rd position on the spirit stream list, they were even more shocked by the terrifying method he had used. No one knew how he had done it, but he had actually summoned the Vermilion Bird, one of the 4 divine beasts, and killed over 200 people from the myriad Demon's Ridge in one fell swoop. At this moment, Lu Yi had an unspeakable bitterness. Originally, the myriad poisons forest was filled with poisonous miasma. The moment he fell, he had started to flee. With his powerful perception, as well as the concealment bracelet and concealment spirit inscriptions, as long as his luck wasn't too bad, he basically didn't have to worry about being discovered by the people from the myriad Demon's Ridge. However, the spirit stream list was like a huge flag that suddenly fluttered above his head. The flag accurately pointed out Lu Ye's location to the cultivators from the myriad Demon's Ridge. In an instant, the cultivators, who were originally aimlessly searching for traces of Lu Yi, started to move towards the spirit stream list's direction. Lu Ye's mouth was filled with bitterness. What made him even more angry was the fact that his name was displayed on the spirit stream list. Even Heaven's Secret had determined that his name was Lu Yi. His name was clearly Lu Yi. Bastard Lushan, just you wait. Dragging his exhausted body, Lu Yi forced himself to stay alert and hurriedly entered the depths of the myriad poisons forest. The omnipresent poisonous miasma might be a problem for other cultivators, but for Lu Yi, it wasn't a threat at all. As long as he had enough fuel stored in his innate skill tree, all the poison that had invaded his body would be burned clean. Relying on his powerful perception, Lu Yi was often able to detect the other cultivators from the myriad Demon's Ridge before they were searching for him. Furthermore, the myriad poisons forest was obstructed by vision. As far as the eye could see, the entire myriad poisons forest was filled with all kinds of bright colors. Those colors condensed into poisonous fog and miasma that drifted aimlessly within the myriad poisons forest. Lu Yi was already wearing the vanishing bracelet. Once he sensed someone nearby, he would immediately activate the vanishing bracelet's power to conceal himself. The spirit artifact that Madame Yun had bestowed upon him was of great help at this time. Although Lu Ye's spirit qi was rapidly recovering, it was best to not consume it at this time. The amount of spirit qi required to activate the vanishing bracelet was much less than that required to activate the concealment spirit rune. Furthermore, the concealment effect of this spirit artifact was more outstanding than that of the concealment spirit rune. There were constantly cultivators from the myriad demons' ridge passing by, searching in all directions. Only after they left did Lu Yi continue to flee. He walked and stopped. Suddenly, Lu Yi felt a great sense of danger. He hurriedly stopped and concealed his whereabouts. The surroundings were quiet, and there were no signs of the myriad demons' ridge cultivators searching for him. Lu Yi frowned. He originally thought that he was hallucinating. Just as he was about to remove the power of the vanishing bracelet, that sense of danger appeared out of nowhere again. He stood in place, held his breath, and carefully looked around. His perception, which was far beyond that of a spirit stream realm cultivator, played a crucial role at this moment. Lu Yi felt a faint flow of vitality not far from him. There was someone in that position. Furthermore, to be able to conceal his aura and figure to such an extent, it was obviously an extremely powerful ghost cultivator. He quietly activated the Insight Spirit rune to enhance his eyes. As expected, he saw traces of a human-shaped spirit qi flowing in that position. The ghost cultivator seemed to have sensed something. He hid his figure and wandered nearby. After a while, he actually walked to a spot not far from Lu Yi. The two people who had concealed themselves were less than 30 feet apart from each other, sizing each other up. The spirit qi flowing in the ghost cultivator's body suddenly sped up. Lu Yi immediately determined that the other party was about to make a move. It wasn't that the ghost cultivator had sensed his presence. The ghost cultivator opposite him was probably just trying it out. A clanging sound rang out, and the weapon box at Lu Ye's waist shot out 9 streams of light. Since he realized that the ghost cultivator was about to make a move, Lu Yi naturally wouldn't foolishly wait. The ghost cultivator who had yet to make a move was clearly startled. He hurriedly revealed himself, revealing an ordinary face. It was Ghost Shadow, who was ranked 9th on the spirit stream list. As his spirit qi surged, the short blade in Ghost Shadow's hand turned into an afterimage. A series of clanging sounds rang out as the 9 imperial weapons were blocked. When he looked up again, Lu Yi had already soared into the sky on his weapon. Ghost Shadow flew into a rage. This was the first time his whereabouts had been discovered while he was hiding. He didn't know how Lu Yi had done it, but it was something that no ghost cultivator could accept. Without any delay, he summoned his flying spirit tool and chased after him. At the same time, shouts came from all directions. Lu Yi is here. The myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who were searching for Lu Yi in the air had discovered him. In an instant, the scene became lively as one figure after another chased after Lu Yi, attacking him with flying spirit tools and spells from afar. Lu Yi had no choice but to use his spirit tool to dodge the attacks. He went all the way into the depths of the myriad poisons forest. Not long after, he encountered a stream of light. Lu Yi looked over and saw a broad figure standing on top of the flying spirit tool. The figure's body was covered in a green spirit qi. It was obvious that he had been poisoned. A white tiger was lying on his shoulder. Giant armor. Lu Yi had contacted Yi earlier, wanting them to come and help him. Now that his whereabouts had been exposed, Giant Armor didn't need to hide anymore. The two sides quickly met. Lu Yi jumped onto Giant Armor's flying spirit tool. Giant Armor immediately turned around and rushed into the depths of the myriad poisons forest. A large number of streams of light chased after him. However, as the chase went on, some people found it difficult to continue. In this damned myriad poisons forest, the deeper one went, the stronger the toxicity of the poisonous miasma. Even though the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators had taken antidote pills in advance and prepared some poison-resistant spirit tools, many of them couldn't hold on. If they continued to chase, they didn't know if Lu Yi would die, but they would definitely die. What surprised them was that giant armor was clearly poisoned, but he was still tenaciously living. It was really shocking. Gradually, the people chasing behind them decreased. After a cup of tea's time, there was not a single pursuer left. At this depth, the spirit stream realm cultivators had reached their limit. If they stayed for more than an incense stick's worth of time, even antidote pills wouldn't be of much use. Giant Armor's body was also a little shaky, and the spirit tool he was using was no longer under his control. Finally, he couldn't hold on and fell down. He and Yi hadn't gone deep into this place before. Chapter 375. With a crash, the branches broke and two figures fell to the ground. Yi hurriedly appeared and used her spirit energy to support Lu Yi and giant armor. Only then did they land steadily. Lu Ye's vision was filled with double images and he saw stars. The after effects of using the fire phoenix had already been revealed. Although his spirit energy was gradually recovering under the effect of the fruit wine, the burden of using such a large spirit pattern could not be easily erased. He had been chased by the people of Myriad Demon Ridge and could not rest for a while. At this moment, his skin was cracked and covered in blood, looking extremely shocking. Lu Yi, are you okay? Yi's voice had a trace of sobbing. Apart from the time she brought Lu Yi to Ing Mountain to find Hua Xiai to save his life, she had not seen Lu Yi so miserable in a long time. Lu Yi waved his hand and took a deep breath. He took out a bottle of royal jelly from his storage bag and handed it to Yi. Let Giant Armor drink this. Giant Armor was heavily poisoned and had to be treated quickly. Yi had said that the ordinary honey they brought from Hidden Fog Mountain had some detoxification effect, so this royal jelly definitely had it as well, and the effect was even better. While Yi was feeding Giant Armor the royal jelly, Lu Yi forced himself to set up a formation. This place was already considered the depths of Myriad Poison Forest. The poisonous miasma around them was fierce. He had the talent tree to burn pill poison. As long as he had enough fuel, he could be immune to poison. However, Giant Armor and Yi could not. Without the protection of the formation, they would be poisoned to death before long. Array flags flew out one after another, and soon, a simple protective array was arranged into a framework. Lu Yi then directed Yi to place enough spirit stones in the appropriate positions, and finally placed the array flag that controlled the array at the core. The formation was activated and a curtain of light surged out, enveloping the place where they were, forming a semicircle of about 10 feet. This was not the end. Lu Yi also constructed a spirit-gathering spirit pattern on his spirit cavities. He did not need to use the spirit pattern to recover his spirit energy, but to absorb the poisonous miasma in the formation. Only then could the formation be considered safe. With Lu Ye's current cultivation, constructing a spirit-gathering spirit pattern was very simple. A moment later, under the guidance of the spirit-gathering spirit runes, the green mist visible to the naked eye poured into Lu Ye's body. The environment inside the formation was quickly improved, and the area that was originally filled with poisonous mist gradually became clear. Lu Yi looked at Giant Armor's situation and found that the royal jelly's detoxification effect was good. The green on Giant Armor's body had become much lighter. He gave the storage bag containing the royal jelly and good honey to Yi, who could also take a bottle of the jelly. The rest can be used to detoxify the poison. You take care of it. I need to rest. Yi quickly nodded and looked at Lu Yi again, only to see that he had already fallen asleep with his head lowered. The Myriad Demons Ridge's side celebrated. It was not easy. This star of calamity was finally at the end of his road. Thinking back, ever since Lu Ye's identity as a disciple of the Blue Bloods sect had been exposed, he had stirred up a storm in the Spirit Stream battlefield. The initial battle on Golden Light Peak had been a big one, but the cultivation of the people who had fought Lu Yi at that time had not been very high. In the eyes of true masters, they had been nothing more than children playing house. However, as his cultivation grew, the threat he posed to Myriad Devil Ridge also grew. In the outer circle, the forces of Myriad Devil Ridge next to the Blue Blood sect were suppressed to the point that they could not raise their heads. The cultivators of the various sects hid in their own bases all year round, not daring to show their faces. There were even 2 forces of Myriad Devil Ridge that had not been able to rebuild their bases. Within a radius of a few hundred miles, the Blue Blood sect could be said to have the absolute advantage. When this fellow entered the inner circle, he became even more impressive. He used some unimaginable means to break the great defensive formation and attack other forces' bases. Especially after he returned from the Sky Expanse sect who was proficient in formation Tao, he quickly formed a Grand Sky Alliance army. Wherever they went, they were unstoppable. More than 100 forces from the Myriad Devil Ridge suffered because of this. The suffering was so deep that the people from the Myriad Devil Ridge complained and their expressions changed. In the end, this matter became so serious that both sides had to send out Divine Sea Realm cultivators to negotiate a solution. This was unprecedented. Both the outer circle and the inner circle were in turmoil because of him. Myriad Devil Ridge had suffered so many losses and was full of anger. They were all sharpening their swords. Once he entered the inner circle, they would teach him a lesson. This wish was quickly fulfilled. This guy reached the 7th heaven realm at an extremely fast speed and entered the inner circle. What was the result? The pursuit in the hidden fog mountain ended with the Myriad Devil Ridge losing hundreds of people. In the forest of 1,000 poisons, 200 people were killed by him. 5 on the spirit stream list died, including Wu Beihan, who was ranked 33rd. This allowed him to enter the spirit stream list with the cultivation of the 7th heaven realm and become the center of attention of the 9 states. This guy was not only a star of calamity, but also the nemesis of Myriad Devil Ridge. Anyone who had anything to do with him would not have a good ending for Myriad Devil Ridge. Thankfully, he had been forced into the depths of the forest of 10,000 poisons. That was a true forbidden zone for cultivators, and one of the most infamous death zones in the spirit stream battlefield. It didn't matter how strong you were, you would definitely die if you entered that damned place. How could Myriad Devil Ridge not be happy? The huge losses they had suffered were temporarily forgotten. For Myriad Devil Ridge, as long as they could kill Lu Ye, no matter how big the losses were, they could accept it. This guy's growth was too fast, and his methods were too terrifying. It would be too late if they did not get rid of him before he fully matured. The spirit stream list that had appeared in the sky had long since disappeared. However, many cultivators could use their battlefield imprints to check the spirit stream list, so it was easy to know whether Lu Ye was still alive or not. They just needed to look at the spirit stream list to see if his name was still on it. Back in the Heaven Expanse sect, Lu Ye had faked his death. At that time, Myriad Devil Ridge had believed him and celebrated for a long time. In the end, 2 months later, Lu Ye had come out of seclusion in the Heaven Expanse sect and quickly pulled out a Grand Heaven Alliance army. The forces of Myriad Devil Ridge began to doubt themselves. Now that the spirit stream list was there, he could not fake his death even if he wanted to. Moreover, there was news that many people from Grand Heaven Alliance were trying to contact Lu Ye, but they had not received any response. Hearing this news, Myriad Devil Ridge was even more certain that Lu Ye would not live for long. If there was no response, then he must have fainted. Therefore, it would not be long before he died from the poison. In order to prevent him from escaping from the forest of 1,000 poisons, the various forces of Myriad Devil Ridge sent a large number of cultivators over. In a very short time, they had surrounded the forest of 1,000 poisons so tightly that not even a drop of water could pass through. Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators were everywhere. Under such a dense encirclement, even a mosquito would not be able to fly out of the forest of 1,000 poisons. Grand Heaven Alliance had also responded. Led by several large sects from the War Province, they organized a few attacks. However, due to the huge difference in numbers, it was difficult for them to accomplish anything. They could only temporarily retreat and continue to gather more people. However, everyone knew that time was running out. The Forest of 1,000 Poisons was a place where the deeper one went, the more dangerous it became. Lu Ye could not be contacted, and no one knew how long he could last inside. Perhaps in 1 or 2 days, his name would disappear from the spirit stream list. When that happened, it would be the time of his death. At this time, a stream of light flashed past near the core of the Forest of 1,000 Poisons. Wrapped in that stream of light was a voluptuous figure. It was none other than Hua Xi. When she had contacted Lu Yi before, he had told her not to come. Although she had agreed, how could she not go? If she had not obtained the inheritance, she would not have gone, because with her strength, even if she went, she would only cause trouble. However, now that she had obtained all the inheritances in the land of inheritance, and Lu Yi and the others were trapped in the Forest of 1,000 Poisons, there was a place for her to use. At this moment, Hua Xi's face was full of anxiety. Her expression was solemn as she tirelessly tried to contact Lu Yi through her battlefield mark. However, all the messages were like stones sinking into the sea. She had heard about the Forest of 1,000 Poisons on her way here, so at this moment, she was moving at full speed without caring about the cost, just to reach the Forest of 1,000 Poisons as soon as possible. However, even if she had obtained all the inheritances, she was only an ordinary 9th order cultivator. On top of that, she was also a medical cultivator. How fast could her artifact manipulation speed be? Just as she was thinking about this, several streams of light rushed over from not far away and soon arrived in front of her. Hua Xi paused and looked at the newcomers. This place could barely be regarded as the core area, so the difference in strength between the cultivators she encountered was huge. The newcomers had dense auras around their bodies, and their artifact manipulation speed was very fast. It was obvious that they had all converted to heaven-grade secret arts. The leader was a Heaven 8th Order cultivator. This person looked at Hua Xi coldly, then slowly raised his hand to her, the back of his hand glowing with a pale red luster. This method of directly declaring one's faction as soon as they met undoubtedly meant that they did not want to talk nonsense with Hua Xi. If they were on the same side, they would naturally be on good terms with each other, but if they were on the opposite side, they would definitely not show mercy. Hua Xi's 9th order cultivation was obvious at a glance, and these heaven-grade cultivators could easily deal with her. Hua Xi did not raise her hand. She just looked at the newcomers and said indifferently, "I am a medical cultivator." The identity of a medical cultivator was a layer of protection in the spirit stream battlefield and even in the entire 9 states. Just like when Lu Yi captured Feng Yu alive. If Feng Yu was not a medical cultivator, even if she knelt down and kowtowed, she would have died without a doubt. The young man who showed his battlefield mark to Hua Xi raised his brow. Words are not proof. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and sent a stream of light towards Hua Xi. Hua Xi did not dodge, and the stream of light changed direction at the moment it was about to hit her chest, sweeping past her arm. Blood splattered, and a 3-inch long wound appeared on her fair arm. Her flesh and blood curled up. Chapter 376. It was very easy to verify whether a cultivator was a medical cultivator or not. Just look at the healing methods they used. This was the reason why Tian 8 had injured Hua Xi. Hua Xi raised her hand and a soft and warm green light gushed out from her palm. The light enveloped the wound, and in just 3 breaths, the wound stopped bleeding. After a dozen breaths, Hua Xi stopped. Everyone looked at the wound and raised their eyebrows. Because the wound was already showing signs of healing. When Hua Xi revealed the attribute of her spirit qi, they had already determined that she was not lying. Only a medical cultivator's spirit qi would be so gentle and warm. But now, after seeing Hua Xi's methods, they realized that they had underestimated her. This healing speed was not something an ordinary medical cultivator could achieve. This undoubtedly showed that the medical cultivator in front of them was extremely skilled. "Which sect are you from?" Tian 8 asked. A rogue cultivator. Hua Xiai was obviously not stupid enough to tell others that she was from Blue Blood sect. The Heavenly 8 cultivator declined to comment. Among the rogue cultivators, there were all kinds of sects, but the number of medical cultivators was the least. Very few medical cultivators would become rogue cultivators, because as long as they were medical cultivators, no matter how high their cultivation was or how good their medical skills were, they would be the target of all the major sections. No sect would dislike having too many medical cultivators. This was especially true for a ninth order cultivator like Hua Xiai. Even in the spirit stream battlefield, her cultivation was not bad. How could she be a rogue medical cultivator? However, the myriad demons rich cultivators didn't want to get to the bottom of the matter. They had captured Hua Xiai alive. Although they wouldn't take her life, if she wanted to regain her freedom, she would have to pay the price of her sex ransom. At that time, they would naturally be able to figure out her origins. This was an unwritten rule of the spirit stream battlefield since ancient times. Hand over your storage bag. Tian 8 stretched out his hand. Hua Xiai did not resist. She removed the storage pouch from her waist and tossed it to the man. There was nothing in her storage pouch. At most, there were some spirit pills and spirit stones for cultivation and a few spirit tools. A moment later, the group set off again. The myriad demon-rich cultivators felt that Hua Xi's speed was too slow, so they simply let Tian 8 carry her. No one restricted her freedom, nor did they mistreat her. No one thought that a ninth-order medical cultivator would be a threat to them. Where are you going? Hua Xiai asked. The forest of 1,000 poisons. Cultivator Tian Ba, who was flying on his magic tool, replied casually. Hua Xiai nodded and didn't say anything else. The several myriad demon-rich cultivators probably couldn't have imagined that it was this answer that satisfied Hua Xiai that allowed them to escape this calamity. Being carried by the Heavenly 8 cultivator was much faster than Hua Xi's flying speed. In the depths of the myriad poison forest, Lu Ye's dormant consciousness began to awaken. His body felt a little weak, and he wouldn't be able to recover without a few days of rest. However, the bloody clothes on his body had been taken off, and all his wounds were bandaged. It should be Yi's doing. How long have I been asleep? Almost 2 days. Yi took out a water sack from her storage bag and handed it to Lu Yi. Lu Yi took it and gulped it down before looking around. The spirit array he had set up before was still operating. The area covered by the spirit array was isolated from the corrosion of the poisonous fog, but outside the spirit array, there was a flowing green color. It was the poisonous fog flowing in the forest of 1,000 poisons. On the light barrier of the spirit array, there was a constant sizzling sound. Obviously, the poisonous fog was eroding the spirit array, but as long as there were enough spirit stones, there was no need to worry about the spirit array's light barrier being damaged. There was some green flowing on Yi's body, which was obviously a sign of poisoning. Looking at giant armor, the situation was even worse. His entire body was green, and his eyes were deeply sunken. He looked like he wouldn't live for long. If giant armor's physique wasn't strong enough, he would have been poisoned to death. Only Hu Po's body was still bright. The things I gave you didn't work? Lu Yi frowned. They did, but senior brother giant armor must have accumulated too much poison, so those things can only temporarily suppress it. They can't completely expel the poison from his body. Before Lu Yi came, giant armor had been using his own spirit chi to protect Hu Po, preventing him from being corroded by the poison here. Yi had been hiding in Hu Po's body all this time, so she naturally wouldn't be poisoned. However, in order to stabilize giant armor and Lu Yi, Yi had rushed out of Hu Po's body. Even though she was a spirit body, she was still corroded by the poison here. A spirit body couldn't use the royal jelly to detoxify the poison. Fortunately, her symptoms weren't too serious. When Lu Yi was unconscious, he had followed his instructions and fed giant armor the royal jelly. At first, the effects were obvious, but the poison suppressed in his body soon broke out again. After a few times, the royal jelly didn't have much effect. Lu Yi turned to look at Giant Armor. "How do you feel?" Giant Armor gave him a silly smile that was uglier than a crying face. Lu Yi knew that his condition wasn't good. This was troublesome. The poison in Giant Armor's body was so strong that even the royal jelly couldn't detoxify it. If he wanted to detoxify it, he would probably have to send him back to the Blue Blood sect and ask second senior sister for help. However, they were trapped in the forest of 1,000 poisons. Lu Ye's strength had been greatly reduced. How could he break through the blockade of the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators and escape? Although he didn't know what the situation outside was, he was certain that the myriad Devil Ridge had surrounded this place. With his current condition, it was impossible for him to leave. Perhaps he could borrow the power of the innate skill tree to burn the poison. However, the innate skill tree was rooted in Lu Ye's spiritual cavities. When he used the power of the innate skill tree, many undetectable roots would extend from his body and devour the energy that could be devoured. How could he burn the poison in Giant Armor's body? Lu Yi tried a little and found that this method didn't work. The only thing he could do now was to use his spiritual power to invade Giant Armor's body and use the characteristics of his fire attribute spiritual power to burn the poison. However, not only was this inefficient, it also caused great damage to Giant Armor. "Lu Yi, is there no other way?" Yi looked at Giant Armor worriedly. Over the past few days, she had watched as Giant Armor grew weaker and weaker. She was anxious, but there was nothing she could do. Lu Yi muttered to himself for a moment, then raised his head to look at Giant Armor. "Can you break through to the Cloud River realm?" Giant Armor's current cultivation was at Heaven 7, but Lu Yi knew that this wasn't his limit. If Giant Armor wanted to, he could open more spiritual cavities because he had a monster core that could store large amounts of spiritual power. The reason why he maintained his Heaven 7 cultivation was because Lu Ye's cultivation was at this level. All this time, Giant Armor had suppressed his cultivation to the same level as Lu Yi. Perhaps this was Giant Armor's personality, or perhaps it was a habit formed when he followed Sima Yang in the past. He would never let his cultivation surpass the people he followed. Lu Yi had noticed this long ago. Lu Yi didn't know how much spiritual power was stored in Giant Armor's monster core, but if Giant Armor could break through to the Cloud River realm, this deadlock could be resolved. The Spirit Stream battlefield could only accommodate cultivators at the Spirit Stream realm. If Giant Armor broke through here, he would be expelled from the Spirit Stream battlefield and returned to the main sect of the 9 states. At that time, second senior sister would naturally save him. Since ancient times, many cultivators had chosen to break through to the Cloud River realm in their own encampments in the Spirit Stream battlefield. Because the encampments were filled with spiritual power and the environment was safe, it was common knowledge that cultivators would be expelled after breaking through to the Cloud River realm. Lu Yi had naturally heard of this before, but he had never seen it happen. "I don't know," Giant Armor replied with a droning voice. "Let's give it a try." Regardless of whether Giant Armor could break through to the Cloud River realm here, there was no harm in having a higher cultivation. Perhaps the higher his cultivation, the better his condition would be. Giant Armor nodded and closed his eyes. As his spiritual power surged, soft popping sounds could be heard. That was the sound of the spiritual cavities barriers breaking. Even though Lu Yi had experienced the terrifying speed of Giant Armor's awakening before, the corners of his eyes couldn't help but twitch. For any cultivator, breaking through the barriers of their spiritual cavities would require some time. However, for Giant Armor, the process was unimpeded. Wherever his spiritual power passed, the barriers would break. Lu Yi guessed that this had something to do with the abundance of spiritual power in Giant Armor's body. A river dam could stop the flow of water, but it definitely couldn't stop the impact of a flood. In a short moment, 60 popping sounds could be heard. After a while, Giant Armor connected these 60 newly opened apertures with his spiritual power and completed a new minor cycle, successfully breaking through to the Heaven 8 level. The sound of the barriers breaking through rang out once again. Lu Yi and Yi were counting to the side. Another 60 popping sounds could be heard. Lu Yi understood that he had underestimated the spiritual power stored in Giant Armor's Yao core all this time. Giant Armor had long had the ability to break through to the Cloud River realm. The biggest reason that stopped him from breaking through was that he didn't have enough merit points to buy a heaven rank cultivation method. However, ever since Lu Yi helped him gather enough merit points to buy a heaven rank cultivation method, his future path was smooth. He had already opened 360 spiritual cavities in his body. However, because Giant Armor hadn't formed the last 60 into a minor cycle, his current cultivation was still at the Heaven 8 level. With all of his spiritual cavities open, Giant Armor could break through to the Cloud River realm at any time and leave this place. Go back and tell Second Senior Sister and Sect Master that there's no need to worry about me. Lu Yi instructed him while taking out the various spoils of war he had obtained recently. He put them into a storage pouch and tied it to Giant Armor's waist. Perhaps it was because his cultivation had broken through, but Giant Armor's complexion was slightly better than before. Giant Armor looked at him, then suddenly tilted his body and leaned against a large tree. He crossed his arms and gave Lu Yi a view of his back. What was the meaning of this? Lu Yi was baffled. He doesn't want to leave. He's worried about you, Yi said from the side. Lu Yi couldn't help but laugh. He got up and walked to Giant Armor's side. Squatting down beside him, he said earnestly, "You don't want me to stay here and collect your corpse, right? Go back to the sect and find Second Senior Sister. Only she can save you now. I don't want to chase you away, but there's really no other way now. You don't have to worry about me. I'm immune to poison. This place might be dangerous for others, but it's nothing to me. I'll take you and kill our way out." Giant Armor suddenly said with a baleful look. Chapter 377. Don't be silly. Lu Yi raised his hand and patted Giant Armor's shoulder. The Myriad Devil Ridge has the advantage in numbers. Right now, they can't wait for us to appear. Thus, for me, hiding here is the safest. Giant Armor's expression was somewhat dejected. He probably knew that Lu Yi was right. Advance. Return to the sect and report your safety to the sect master and Second Senior Sister. Giant Armor remained silent and did not speak. Lu Yi did not say anything else. He stood up and walked to the side, beginning to perfect the formation that he had set up earlier. Although the previous formation could be used, it had been hastily set up after all. There were many areas that could be improved. Array flags were set down one after another. The area covered by the formation increased significantly, and the formation was maintained more stably. While Lu Yi was busy, Giant Armor only watched quietly. When Lu Yi was done, he suddenly said, "You have to live." Lu Yi turned to look at him. "You definitely won't die." Only then did Giant Armor sit down cross-legged. The surging spirit power in his body quickly calmed down, and his cultivation level rapidly fell. The process of a cultivator advancing from Spirit Stream to Cloud River was actually not difficult. The difficult part was the opening of the apertures. As long as the number of open spirit apertures in the body was enough, advancing to Cloud River was not too risky. In just a moment, all the small circulatory cycles in Giant Armor's body stopped circulating. As he continued, his spirit power, starting from the source of the spirit aperture, began to pass through one spirit aperture after another. The more spirit apertures that were passed through, the more violent the spirit power fluctuations on Giant Armor's body became. If one listened carefully, they could even hear the movement of the spirit power flowing in his body. At first, it was not very obvious, but slowly, the spirit power flowed like a stream, and then the movement became greater. Until a certain moment, when the spirit power passed through all 360 apertures, the boiling spirit power in his body surged like a river, emitting a buzzing sound. A dazzling spirit light flashed from Giant Armor's body. With him as the center, an invisible wave of chi spread out in all directions. Cloud River Tear. The names of the Spirit Stream Tear and Cloud River Tear actually came from the flow of spiritual power in one's body. Spirit Stream Realm cultivators had a system of minor heavenly circulations in their bodies, and their spirit energy flowed like a stream. The number of minor heavenly circulations in their bodies determined their realm. That was why they were called 7 heavens, 8 heavens, and 9 heavens, and not 10th, 11th, or 12th order spirit stream realm. This was because after a cultivator switched to a heaven-grade secret art, the number of minor heavenly circulations in their bodies would not reach that many. Of course, in terms of merit points gained from killing enemies, Heaven's Secret calculated it according to the 10th, 11th, or 12th order spirit stream realm. Unlike the Spirit Stream Tear, the spiritual power in the body of the Cloud River Tear only had one circulation system, and that was the circulation system of all the spiritual apertures that had already been opened. For example, the Giant Armor had opened up 360 apertures, and that was a perfect circulation system. All of the spiritual energy flowed through this great cycle like a river. The cultivator's control over spiritual energy would undergo an earth-shattering change. Their strength would also undergo a qualitative change, and their strength would increase exponentially. It was because of this reason that cultivators in the spirit stream realm would try their best to open up more spiritual apertures, and that was why there were so many cultivators who were unwilling to casually break through to the Cloud River Tier. This was because the more spiritual apertures one opened, after breaking through to the Cloud River Tier, the greater the increase in one's strength and future potential would be. Every additional spiritual aperture opened in the spirit stream realm would increase one's strength in the Cloud River Tier. Perhaps the difference of 1 or 2 spiritual apertures would be the difference in whether or not one could break through to the true Lake Tier in the future. Everyone knew that the foundation was the most important in cultivation. For cultivators, the spirit stream realm was the foundation of cultivation, and everyone would do their best to strengthen their foundation. This was because when a cultivator broke through to the Cloud River Tier, there would be a huge difference in the number of spiritual apertures. It was possible to break through between 240 apertures and 360 apertures. This led to a huge disparity in the strength of cultivators in the Cloud River Tier. In the Spirit Stream Tier, killing enemies of a higher tier and defeating stronger opponents as the weak was the exclusive practice of many cultivation geniuses, but in the Cloud River Tier, this was an extremely common occurrence. This was the first time that someone had broken through to the Cloud River Tier right under Lu Ye's nose. He would have to take this step sooner or later, so he had been observing carefully, hoping to gain some experience. However, in the end, he found that breaking through to the Cloud River Tier was just as the rumors said, there was not much risk. As long as one opened up enough spiritual apertures, the process of breaking through would be smooth. Almost at the instant that Giant Armor broke through to the Cloud River Tier, the space around him became slightly distorted. Giant Armor obviously sensed something, and hurriedly opened his eyes. He opened his mouth as if wanting to say something, but before he could say anything, the distorted space returned to normal, and Giant Armor disappeared without a trace. Lu Yi immediately sent a message to Shui Yuanyuan. After a short while, he received a reply. Giant Armor had already appeared in the Heavenly Mystery Hall of the Jade Blood Sect's main sect. Second senior sister was checking on his condition, and told Lu Yi not to worry. Lu Yi naturally had nothing to worry about. Previously, in the Heaven Expanse sect, Giant Armor had been saved by second senior sister even when he had been so violently poisoned, so this was nothing. Now that Giant Armor's problem had been resolved, Lu Yi turned to look at Yi. He didn't know how to resolve Yi's problem. Yi couldn't break through to the Cloud River Tier and return to the Jade Blood Sect's main sect with the help of the Heavenly Mystery Hall's rules. Moreover, her spirit body couldn't eat anything. I'm fine, just a little uncomfortable. Yi seemed to sense what Lu Yi was thinking and took the initiative to comfort him. Has Hoopa eaten the royal jelly? He has. It didn't work on you? Yi was Hoopa's spirit, so if he could absorb some antidotes through Hoopa, perhaps it would work on Yi. Yi shook her head and stepped forward to grab Lu Ye's arm, resting her head on his shoulder. Don't think about these things. Rest well and recover first. If there's anything wrong, you have to tell me immediately. Lu Yi warned her seriously. Yi didn't respond. Lu Yi raised a hand and flicked her forehead. You hear me? I know. Yi raised a hand to rub her forehead, an aggrieved expression on her face. Lu Yi checked his battlefield imprint. He had been unconscious for 2 days, so there were many messages left in the battlefield imprint. After checking, he found that most of them were asking about his current situation. Many of them even asked him to hold on for a while. The Haotian Alliance was preparing to gather a group of people and force their way out. They also asked Lu Yi to cooperate with them and escape from the Forest of 1,000 Poisons. There were also some guardian envoys from the inner circle who were on their way to support them. For example, Luo Fu from the Silver Light Island, Zhou Pei from the Cloud-Soaring Palace, Zhao Li from the Sky Expanse sect, and so on. The messages were filled with concern and worry. Lu Yi replied to them one by one, telling them that he was safe and that they didn't need to worry. 100 miles away from the Forest of 1,000 Poisons, more than 2,000 cultivators from the Haotian Alliance gathered in a secluded place. They were led by cultivators from several major sects in the War Province. At this moment, a group of people surrounded Yu Lianzhou from the Beixian Sword sect, waiting for the result of his message with Lu Yi. After half an hour, Yu Lianzhou finally ended the message. How is it? A cultivator from the Vitality sect asked. Yu Lianzhou looked up at the crowd and said, Daoist Lu said that we must not have a large-scale conflict with the Myriad Demons Ridge. Otherwise, he'll be the sinner of the Haotian Alliance. Once such a large-scale conflict with more than a few thousand people happened, both the Haotian Alliance and the Myriad Demons Ridge would definitely suffer a lot of casualties. When Lu Yi learned that the Haotian Alliance was preparing to rescue him, he was most worried about this. He also said that he's very safe over there. He's built a safe zone with a formation, and the poison in the Forest of 1,000 Poisons can't invade it. Although he's injured, it's not serious. He's going to cultivate inside and only come out when he reaches the Heaven 9 realm. The group of people had a strange expression when they heard that. They had been on tenterhooks for Lu Yi, fearing that he would die in the Myriad Poison Forest. But now, it seemed that Lu Yi was living a comfortable life inside. If this was really the case, then they really couldn't have a large-scale conflict with the Myriad Devil Ridge. Brother Yu, do you think that Daoist Lu Yi is telling the truth? Perhaps Lu Yi didn't want the Haotian Alliance to suffer too many casualties, so he pretended to comfort them. He swore a heavenly secret oath in the message. Yu Lianzhou didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he replied, so it shouldn't be fake. Then, should we still save him? That's right. If Lu Yi was living a good life in the Forest of 1,000 Poisons, should they still save him? If they didn't save him, everyone was already gathered here. If they saved him, it seemed like he didn't really need it. Yu Lianzhou said, we'll do what Daoist Lu told us to do. Right now, a large number of cultivators from the Myriad Demons Ridge are attracted to the Forest of 1,000 Poisons just to kill him. However, they don't dare to casually enter the Forest of 1,000 Poisons. This will only waste their cultivation time. He'll stay in the Forest of 1,000 Poisons and waste his time with the people from the Myriad Demons Ridge. When he reaches the Heaven 9 realm, he'll naturally be able to escape. Lu Ye's Heaven 9 realm cultivation could kill a Heaven 9 realm cultivator. Previously, he used a powerful technique like the Fire Phoenix to reach the 33rd place on the Spirit Stream list. If he really cultivated to the Heaven 9 realm, who in the Spirit Stream battlefield would be his match? When that time came, even if the Myriad Demons Ridge gathered more people here, he would still be able to escape. So we're just going to ignore him. This Daoist Yi is really amazing. If you ask me, since we're already here, we should at least kill some people from the Myriad Demon's Ridge before leaving. It's not easy to gather so many people in the core region. We should at least get rid of someone, right? Yes, yes. The Myriad Demon's Ridge has made a big move this time. Now that we don't have to worry about Daoist Ye's safety, we should return the favor. Otherwise, wouldn't it show that our Grand Sky Alliance has no capable people? The group of people kept shouting. The experts on the Spirit Stream list in charge also knew that with so many people gathered here, it was impossible for them to just disperse. Now that they didn't have to rescue Lu Yi, they had no more scruples and could move more flexibly. They immediately gathered together to discuss. Soon, more than 2,000 people split up and scattered in all directions. Since they didn't have to rescue Lu Yi and couldn't rush into the forest of 1,000 poisons, they would go and kill the cultivators from the Myriad Demon's Ridge who came to help. In any case, they couldn't return empty-handed. Who cared if they had dates or not? While more than 2,000 people from the Grand Sky Alliance scattered, the cultivators from the Myriad Demon's Ridge were thinking about a question. Why wasn't Lu Yi dead yet? Chapter 378. 2 days ago, Lu Yi had used an inexplicable method to summon the vermilion bird, one of the 4 sacred beasts. He had killed more than 200 cultivators in the core region of the Myriad Devil Ridge in one fell swoop. Such an unimaginably powerful method definitely had an unimaginable burden on cultivators. After that, he had been rescued by giant armor and escaped into the depths of the Myriad Poison Forest. Everyone thought that he would not live for long and would die from the poison soon. But now, 2 days had passed, and he was still alive and well. That was because his name was still on the Spirit Stream list, and hadn't disappeared. Why was he still alive? Those from the Myriad Demon's Ridge could not understand this. Even if he was proficient in formations and could create a suitable living environment for himself through formations, he had already been poisoned in the process of going deep into the Myriad Poison Forest. There was no reason for him to continue lingering at death's door. Maybe he was going to die soon. With this kind of expectation, the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators gathered outside the Myriad Poison Forest continued to wait. As long as Lu Yi was alive, they would not be at ease. They had to stay here and watch this jinx die in the Myriad Poison Forest with their own eyes. While waiting, bad news quickly spread. The Grand Heaven Alliance was intercepting and killing the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who were rushing over from all directions. They had already suffered a lot of losses. This situation was expected. The Grand Heaven Alliance would definitely target the Myriad Devil Ridge with such a big movement. However, the Grand Heaven Alliance did not have as many people as the Myriad Devil Ridge, so they could only do this. The Myriad Devil Ridge side sent messages to all directions, telling the cultivators who came to support to be careful. They also sent people to receive them. 200 miles away from the Myriad Poison Forest, a battle had just ended. Although it was called a battle, it was actually a one-sided massacre. Several Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators' corpses were lying on the ground. Beside the corpses, a quiet and dignified woman stood quietly. The back of her hand was shining with a blue light. It was Hua Xiai, who had been captured by the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. Looking at the corpses on the ground, Hua Xiai felt helpless. She had wanted to follow the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators to the Myriad Poison Forest and then enter to find Lu Yi. Who would have thought that these short-lived people would be so unlucky and be killed by a group of Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators who had been lying in ambush here? Left with no choice, Hua Xiai could only reveal her battlefield imprint. There were 8 cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance who attacked them. The leader was a 9th Heaven cultivator. The long sword in his hand stopped 3 inches away from Hua Xiai. When he saw the blue light, he immediately withdrew his sword and said in surprise, "Junior sister, why are you with the people from the Wanmo Ridge?" Hua Xiai explained, "I'm a medical cultivator. I was captured by them." Everyone came to a sudden realization. It was not uncommon for enemy medical cultivators to be captured in the spirit stream battlefield. Generally, medical cultivators who were captured would not be treated too harshly, which led them to think that Hua Xi was in cahoots with those people. "Junior sister, this place isn't too peaceful right now. Do you want to come with us?" the sword-wielding cultivator asked. Although Hua Xi's ordinary 9th order cultivation wasn't very high, she was still qualified to enter the core circle. Most importantly, she was a medical cultivator. When cultivators fought with others, who wouldn't get injured? With a medical cultivator by their side, they would be able to fight freely. Hua Xi shook her head. The sword-wielding cultivator didn't force her. Seeing this, he said, "Junior sister, you should leave quickly. There might be cultivators from the Wanmo Ridge coming here to investigate the situation soon." After instructing Hua Xi, the group quickly left on their artifacts. After sending off the group of cultivators, Hua Xi looked at the corpses lying in the pool of blood. She felt resentful towards them for failing to live up to her expectations. She felt that these fellows were too weak. When they were facing her, they were insufferably arrogant. However, when facing the cultivators from Grand Heaven Alliance, they could not even withstand a single blow. There were still 200 kilometers left. She could only summon her flying spirit artifact and fly towards the myriad poison forest. Her storage bag had been taken away by the people from the Wanmo Ridge. Now, it had become the spoils of war for the cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance. She didn't ask for it. After all, there was nothing valuable in it. This flying spirit artifact was the only thing she had left. Along the way, her luck was surprisingly good. She didn't encounter anyone from the Grand Heaven Alliance or the Wanmo Ridge. When she arrived outside the myriad poison forest, she saw a large group of Wanmo Ridge cultivators gathered together. If one looked down from the sky, they would see that these people from the Wanmo Ridge had surrounded the entire myriad poison forest tightly. Not only on the ground, but even in the sky, there were a large number of Wanmo Ridge cultivators patrolling in the sky to prevent Lu Yi from escaping. However, the myriad poison forest was filled with extremely dense poisonous miasma. Therefore, the cultivators patrolling in the sky couldn't see the situation in the forest clearly. Hua Xi didn't land. Instead, she floated in the air and looked at the poisonous forest in front of her. Some Wanmo Ridge cultivators noticed her, but at most, they took a few more glances at her because of her beauty. They didn't pay much attention to her. No one expected that there would be a medical cultivator from the Grand Heaven Alliance in this place where a large number of Wanmo Ridge cultivators were gathered. She ran over so brazenly and hovered in the air so openly. It was as if she was afraid that others couldn't see her. When a cultivator didn't show the luster of their battlefield mark, no one would know which camp they belonged to except for those who were familiar with them. Hua Xi was a 9th order cultivator and acted so calmly. Who would think of investigating which camp she belonged to? This was a typical case of darkness under the light. Is there a medical cultivator? A medical cultivator. Suddenly, a person's voice rang out nearby. Hua Xi turned her head and saw a young man shouting loudly. She originally planned to ignore him, but the young man's next sentence made her change her mind. Do you have a medical cultivator to help us search for Lu Yi in the forest? I'm a medical cultivator. Hua Xi landed lightly in front of the young man. The young man looked her up and down. Although he felt that this woman was pleasing to the eye, he still felt a little disdainful. Your cultivation is a little low. He wanted to find a medical cultivator who cultivated a heaven-grade secret art. After all, they had to go deep into the myriad poison forest. If a medical cultivator's cultivation was higher, their safety would be more guaranteed. I'm good at detoxification, Hua Xi said lightly. The young man glanced at Hua Xi suspiciously. Then, he walked to the side and found a man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks. He whispered a few words into his ear. The man chuckled and took out a pink spirit pill from his storage bag. The young man took the spirit pill and came to Hua Xi. handing it to her. "If someone is poisoned by this poison, can you detoxify it?" Hua Xiai took the spirit pill and threw it into her mouth without even looking at it, swallowing it directly. The people nearby were dumbfounded, and the young man was also dumbfounded. He just wanted to test Hua Xi's detoxification ability, but who knew that Hua Xiai would eat the pill directly? The owner of the spirit pill, the man with a protruding mouth and an ape-like chin, couldn't help but come over and carefully observe Hua Xi's reaction. After a while, he found it hard to believe. "Are you okay?" That spirit pill was not a highly toxic item, but it was not something that could be easily tainted by women. Even if a female cultivator who had switched to a heaven-grade cultivation method consumed it, it was inevitable that they would be mesmerized by it. This kind of thing was usually used in private. Who would so brazenly consume it in public without fear of making a fool of themselves? Is there more? Hua Xiai looked at the man with a protruding mouth and an ape-like chin, as if she wanted more. The man's eyes couldn't help but twitch. This was the first time in his life that he had seen such a strange woman. Junior sister's detoxification method is really amazing. The young man who had shouted before laughed loudly. "Then it's you. Once we enter the forest, we still have to rely on junior sister." Hua Xiai revealed a gentle smile. "Senior brothers, don't worry. Just leave your lives to me." Her words sounded a little strange, but the young man didn't think much of it. He waved his hand and said, "Everyone is here. Let's go." Following his call, a group of more than 20 people gathered together. Under the young man's lead, they went deep into the forest of 1,000 poisons. Although the myriad Devil Ridge was certain that Lu Yi would not live for long, in order to guard against any tricks he might play in the forest, they would send people into the forest of 1,000 poisons from time to time to search for his whereabouts and restrict his movement space. Even if they couldn't find Lu Yi, they couldn't let him escape from the forest's depths. The dangers in the forest of 1,000 poisons were not only the omnipresent poisonous fog and miasma, but also many poisonous creatures. Fortunately, a large number of people had been coming in and out of the forest of 1,000 poisons recently, so the poisonous creatures in the periphery had basically been cleaned up. After entering the forest of 1,000 poisons, the group of more than 20 people didn't disperse too far. With their previous experience in the hidden fog mountain, they really didn't dare to spread their strength too far, lest they be ambushed by Lu Yi. Hua Xiai was undoubtedly a key target of protection. She was the only medical cultivator in the whole team who hadn't switched to a heaven-grade cultivation method, so how could these people not be careful? "Junior sister, you have to use your spirit power to protect your body." The young man leading the team inadvertently caught a glimpse of Hua Xiai not urging her spirit power to protect her body, but instead breathing in the poisonous fog naturally and hurriedly reminded her. "N." Hua Xiai casually responded and slightly urged her spirit power to protect her body. Seeing this, the young man was relieved. After going all the way in, the toxicity in the poisonous fog had become very strong. Even though everyone had taken some antidote pills in advance before coming in, they still couldn't hold on. The young man leading the team wanted to retreat. The myriad Devil Ridge had conducted such a search many times in the past few days, but they hadn't found anything. However, for the myriad Devil Ridge, no gain was the greatest gain. This meant that Lu Yi was still in the depths of the forest of 1,000 poisons. Just as the young man was about to give the order to leave, there was a soft thud not far away. Immediately after, someone exclaimed, "Not good, junior brother Wang has been poisoned." As soon as the voice fell, there were a few more thuds. Before one person fell to the ground, he vaguely shouted, "Run, the poison is fierce." Before he could finish speaking, there was no more movement. This unforeseen event shocked everyone. They had entered the forest of 1,000 poisons several times before and had always reached this depth, but they had never encountered such a thing. This time, they didn't know why such an unforeseen event had happened. The thuds continued, and in the blink of an eye, the team of more than 20 people was left with only a few people barely hanging on, but they were also dizzy and confused. Chapter 379. The leader of the group immediately sensed that something was wrong. He didn't know what they had encountered this time, but it was obvious that their group had been poisoned by an extremely subtle poison. Before the poison took effect, no one had noticed it. This caused people to panic. His first reaction was to quickly leave this place, but as soon as he thought this, he felt his spiritual power dissipate. He instinctively reached out to grab Huaxiai. Save, his eyes suddenly widened. In his field of vision, more than a dozen red lights flew from all directions and landed on the back of the medical cultivator's hand. He was all too familiar with this situation. It was the sign of merit points after killing an enemy. The more than a dozen people who had died from the poison were all killed by this medical cultivator. The young man's eyes were filled with disbelief as he looked at Huaxiai in horror. He suddenly lowered his head and looked at his hand. He had grabbed the female medical cultivator's arm in a moment of desperation, but at this moment, his hand had completely lost all feeling. He suddenly remembered what the female medical cultivator had said before coming in. This time, he had really handed his life over to her. Why? The young man gritted his teeth and asked. He really couldn't understand why this female medical cultivator would want to kill their group when they had no enmity with each other. Huaxiai smiled gently. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm a disciple of the Jade Blood sect. The young man's pupils suddenly contracted and his expression changed. He didn't know if he wanted to cry or laugh. A disciple of the Jade Blood sect, he had actually brought a medical cultivator from the Jade Blood sect into the forest of 1,000 poisons to search for traces of Lu Yi. No wonder she would secretly kill them. However, how could someone from the Jade Blood sect appear so brazenly outside the forest of 1,000 poisons? He was now full of regret that he hadn't checked Huaxi's camp at that time. However, at that time, he didn't realize that he needed to check this information at all. I'll kill you. While his consciousness was blurred, the young man used all his strength to raise his hand and slap Huaxiai. Huaxiai only took a few steps back lightly, causing the palm to hit nothing but air. Thump, the young man's body fell heavily to the ground. A red light flew out and landed on the back of Huaxi's hand. Looking at the corpses around her, Huaxiai couldn't help but feel a trace of unreality. She knew that the inheritance she had obtained was very powerful, but now it seemed that this inheritance was even more powerful than she thought. In the past, she only had a variety of mushroom methods to deal with enemies. Those methods were effective against low-level cultivators, but when the cultivator's cultivation level gradually increased, those methods would be very difficult to be effective. This was because she had to plant the mushrooms. If the cultivator flew, it would be very difficult for her methods to be effective. However, after she obtained the complete inheritance, her killing methods were not limited to mushrooms. As long as she wanted to, she could poison people anytime and anywhere. These myriad Devil Ridge cultivators had been traveling with her for such a long time, and they had long been silently poisoned by her. Huazizizizis is right. SSSSSSS who said medical cultivators Hua. Dispersing her protective spiritual energy, Huaxiai breathed in the poisonous fog around her. The poisonous fog, which the cultivators of the core region avoided, was even better than the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to Huaxiai. Her mouth was full of a sweet fragrance, she calmed herself down and walked with light steps, picking up the storage pouches scattered around her. After a while, Huaxiai left, leaving behind corpses that were rapidly corroding. In the depths of the myriad poisons forest, Lu Yi, who was being carefully nursed back to health under Yi's care, suddenly looked down at the back of his hand. There was a strange feeling in the battlefield imprint. He hurriedly checked it. It wasn't a message from someone, but a challenge. Only then did Lu Yi remember that it had been 3 days since he had entered the spirit stream list. His second senior sister had mentioned this matter when she had sent a message to him. Cultivators who entered the spirit stream list for the first time had 3 days to adjust. After 3 days, they would be qualified to challenge those with a higher rank, and be challenged by those with a lower rank. In other words, cultivators who entered the spirit stream list for the first time wouldn't be challenged for 3 days, nor would they be able to challenge others. The scope of the challenge was that the difference in rank didn't exceed 5 places. For example, Lu Yi was currently ranked 33rd, so the strongest person he could challenge was the one ranked 27th. Correspondingly, cultivators ranked 38th to 34th could challenge him, but 39th couldn't, because there was a gap of 5 places between them. Challenges to the spirit stream list were very interesting matters. Because of the participation and maintenance of the heavenly secrets, there were various rules that couldn't be broken. Such challenges didn't need to be fought face to face. After all, most spirit stream stage cultivators were active in the spirit stream battlefield, and some stayed in the 9 prefectures. If someone was hiding in their own base or sect, there was no way to challenge them face to face. Such matters could be initiated with the help of the battlefield imprint, and the heavenly secrets would naturally operate within it, making it very convenient. Take this moment for example. Lu Yi didn't know who had issued a challenge through the battlefield mark, but he had 4 hours to prepare. During this time, he could adjust himself to his peak condition and meet his opponent head-on. When the time came, the heavenly secrets would send Lu Yi and the challenger into a special small space for them to fight. Furthermore, there were many different terrains to choose from in such a small space. If someone challenged Lu Yi, the choice would be in Lu Ye's hands. He could choose the terrain that would allow him to display his advantage. If Lu Yi challenged someone else, the choice would be in their hands. Of course, if he was challenged, he could also refuse. However, if he refused, it would be the same as losing the battle, and the challenger would replace him on the spirit stream list. Lu Yi had only heard of such things, but had never experienced it. Suddenly being challenged was a bit unexpected. However, after thinking about it, he realized that the Myriad Devil Ridge was probably getting impatient. He had been hiding in the Myriad Poisons forest, and the Myriad Devil Ridge was too far away to reach him. Furthermore, he hadn't been poisoned to death, so they wanted to use this method to investigate his situation. If possible, they wanted to use this method to kill him. That way, they wouldn't have to take the risk of entering the Myriad Poisons forest. After carefully examining the various information transmitted by the battlefield imprint, Lu Yi found that the situation was the same as what his second senior sister had said. He had 2 choices. One was to accept the challenge, and the other was to refuse. Lu Yi muttered to himself for a moment, and with a thought, he accepted the challenge. Mysteries of heaven descended from the unseen world, and more information emerged from the battlefield imprint. At present, he had 4 hours to prepare. In addition, he could also choose the terrain of the battle. After examining the terrain, general information about the unique small spaces immediately appeared in Lu Ye's mind, including the unique landforms of these small spaces, their sizes, and so on. There were more than 100 of these small spaces, including ruins, wilderness, deserts, forests, and oceans. The areas they occupied also varied in size. The large ones covered a radius of several miles, while the small ones only covered a radius of a few hundred feet. Since it was his first time experiencing such a thing, Lu Yi naturally wanted to obtain more information. He tried to use the imprint to investigate the challenger's information, but unfortunately, he didn't find anything. For some unknown reason, Heaven's secrets had an invisible protection for the challenger. He checked the spirit stream list again, and glanced at the 5 people ranked between the 34th and 38th places. Among the 5 people, 3 were from the Myriad Devil Ridge, and 2 were from the Grand Heaven Alliance. All of them had the cultivation of the 9th heaven realm. The one who challenged him was definitely one of the 3 from the Myriad Devil Ridge. Yi curiously looked at him from the side. Lu Yi, is someone looking for you? No, someone challenged me on the spirit stream list, Lu Yi casually replied. Someone challenged you? Yi was surprised. You accepted? I accepted. But your current state? Yi's face was filled with worry. Although 3 days had passed, the after-effects of Lu Yi using the fire phoenix had yet to disappear. His body was very weak, and he might not even be able to use half of his usual strength. I'm not going to fight with him. I'm just looking. Accepting the opponent's challenge didn't mean that he had to fight with the opponent. When the 4 hours were up, he could just admit defeat and be done with it. At most, his ranking on the spirit stream list would be replaced by someone else. Hearing Lu Ye's words, Yi felt relieved. Lu Yi then looked at the top 10 cultivators on the spirit stream list. All of them were from first-rank sects in various parts of the 9 prefectures. After roughly scanning the list, Lu Yi found that the top 15 were all from first-rank sects. After that, there were cultivators from second-rank sects. After the 50th place, there were cultivators from third-rank sects, and there weren't many of them. Lu Yi saw Yu Yanzhou's name. He was ranked 7th on the spirit stream list, which could be said to be very high. The first on the list was a guy called Shi Guang from the Tian Continent's Dao Profound sect. He didn't know if he used to be 4th on the list. Yan Xing, the second on the list, had died. Feng Yuechan and Li Baxian had both advanced to the Cloud River realm. The 3 malignant tumors of the spirit stream list had been removed, and the 4th on the list had automatically been promoted to the 1st on the list. In fact, he should be thanking Lu Yi. If Lu Yi hadn't bought 2 sets of supplement aperture pills for Li Baxian, that guy probably wouldn't have been able to reach the 1st position on the list. After figuring out the spirit stream list, Lu Yi withdrew his thoughts and continued to cultivate. While cultivating, he didn't waste any time. He took out a book he had taken from Madame Yun and started to study it. At the same time, he continuously swallowed spirit pills to cultivate. Because of the protective array, it wasn't convenient for him to construct a spirit gathering array, nor was it convenient for him to construct spirit gathering runes in his spiritual cavities. If the spirit chi of heaven and earth flowed too quickly, it would cause the poison in the surroundings to corrode the array and increase the burden on the array. Fortunately, even though he was only swallowing spirit pills, his cultivation speed wasn't slow. It could even be said that swallowing spirit pills was his main method of cultivation. Soon, the 4-hour time limit was up. Lu Ye's mind was connected to the battlefield imprint, and he directly forfeited the battle. Looking at the spirit stream list again, he had fallen from the 33rd place to the 37th place. The myriad Devil Ridge cultivator had taken his place. Lu Yi narrowed his eyes slightly, remembering the name and origin of that person. Before he could withdraw his thoughts, the imprint transmitted a message that someone had challenged him. Lu Yi accepted the challenge as usual. Then, he left it to the side. At the same time, a piece of news quickly spread through the myriad Devil Ridge camp. In the Spirit Stream List challenge, Lu Yi had avoided the battle. It seemed that his situation wasn't good. Chapter 380. Just as Lu Yi had guessed, the myriad Devil Ridge was indeed using this method to probe his situation. After waiting for 3 days, Lu Yi had not been poisoned to death. The myriad Devil Ridge did not dare to go too deep into the myriad poison forest and could not find any trace of Lu Yi, so they could only rely on the Spirit Stream List to challenge him. Lu Yi accepted the challenge, but gave up after 4 hours. This undoubtedly showed that his condition was not very good. Otherwise, there was no reason for him to give up without even fighting. One had to know that the Spirit Stream List challenge was not necessarily a life and death battle. There was a heaven's will involved. If one felt that they were not a match for their opponent, they could escape from the small space of the challenge and preserve their life. Lu Yi did not even dare to show his face. Clearly, he was afraid that the myriad Devil Ridge would spy on him. When the news spread, the originally anxious myriad Devil Ridge cultivators immediately calmed down. They all felt that as long as they continued to wait, Lu Yi would definitely die. In the blink of an eye, another 4 hours passed. Lu Yi's ranking had slipped from 37th to 41st. The myriad devil ridge did not have any intention of giving up. Someone issued another challenge to Lu Yi. In the depths of the myriad poison forest, within the protective array, Lu Yi was somewhat impatient. He was quietly recuperating, reading and cultivating. However, there were always people challenging him through the spirit stream list. Although he could ignore them for 4 hours each time, it was quite troublesome to be disturbed like this. Therefore, when he was challenged for the 3rd time, Lu Yi did not agree and simply refused. After that, his ranking slipped to 46th. In the following incense sticks worth of time, all the cultivators on the battlefield who were qualified to check the spirit stream list could only watch as Lu Ye's ranking fell from 40-something to the bottom of the list, before disappearing from the spirit stream list. 3 days ago, Lu Yi had reached 33rd place on the spirit stream list with his 7th heaven cultivation, creating an unprecedented achievement in the 9 states. In just 3 days, the rising star that had attracted the attention of all the great forces had rapidly fallen from the list. The entire process could be said to be short-lived. The spirit stream list had become clean. There was no longer that dazzling 7th order heaven grade cultivator to stimulate the minds of the myriad devil ridge cultivators. Lu Yi also had peace, with no one disturbing him through the spirit stream list. Just as she was about to rest peacefully, Lu Yi suddenly frowned and called out softly, "Yi." Yi, who was grilling some beast meat for Lu Yi, lifted her head when she heard the call. "Yes." After he finished speaking, he found that Lu Ye's expression wasn't quite right. He was staring in a certain direction with a dignified expression. He slowly stood up, and his spiritual energy surged. Yi disappeared into the ground in a flash. Hoopa jumped onto Lu Ye's shoulder and crouched down. Although he looked inconspicuous, he was already prepared for battle. Lu Yi had never thought that someone would come so deep into this place. Now that the myriad poison forest was sealed off by the cultivators of the myriad devil ridge, those who could enter were definitely enemies of the myriad devil ridge. One could imagine the strength of those who dared to enter this place. He didn't know who it was on the spirit stream list. Lu Yi gripped the hilt of his saber with one hand and the array flag in the other. Although it was difficult for him to use his full strength at the moment, he had already set up a spirit array here. No matter how strong this person was, it would not be so easy to kill him. Kacha, in that direction, the sound of someone stepping on dried leaves could be heard. They passed through the thick green poisonous fog and approached the spirit array step by step. Even though Lu Yi had activated the insight spirit pattern to enhance his eyes, he could not see through the poisonous fog to see the appearance of the person. He could only tell from the other party's graceful figure that it should be a woman. This woman seemed to be about the same height as Hua Xiai, and her figure was also very similar. After a short while, the newcomer stood outside the spirit array and looked at Lu Yi through the spirit array's light screen. Her eyes were full of smiles. Lu Yi was stunned. Big sister Hua Xiai. Yi also emerged from the ground and looked at the newcomer in disbelief. She never thought that she would run into Hua Xiai here. No, Hua Xiai must have come here specifically to find them. With that said, Yi pounced toward Hua Xiai, but was pulled back by Lu Yi. Yi turned her head and looked at him in confusion. Lu Yi lowered his eyes slightly and looked at Hua Xiai outside the spirit array. My family's medical cultivator doesn't have such great ability to come here under the myriad devil ridge's blockade. Who are you? Hearing Lu Ye's words, Yi realized that something was wrong. When she saw Hua Xiai just now, she was only surprised and didn't think of this. Now that she thought about it carefully, Lu Yi was right. How could Hua Xiai have such great ability to come to such a place alone? She immediately looked at Hua Xiai angrily. Who are you? What method did you use to impersonate big sister Hua Xiai? Hua Xiai laughed and looked at Lu Yi with hidden bitterness. Then, she sighed softly and touched her lower abdomen, about to cry. Poor child, your father doesn't recognize us anymore. What should we do? Yi's eyes widened in shock. What do you mean? Lu Yi also froze on the spot as if he had been hit by a guiding thunder talisman. When he saw Hua Xiai, he instinctively felt that this person was an impersonator. But when Hua Xiai said that, he felt that something was wrong. In this world, other than that woman, who else would speak so boldly in front of him? He quickly remembered something and hurriedly sent a message to Hua Xiai through his battlefield mark. Outside the array, Hua Xiai replied, "Child's father, I'm here to find you. Are you happy?" The corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. He waved the array flag in his hand and opened a gap in the array. Hua Xiai flashed through. Lu Yi asked unconfidently. "Is she big sister Hua Xiai?" "Yes. Big sister Hua Xiai." Yi rushed over and hugged Hua Xiai as she jumped up and down. Seeing Hua Xiai in such a place made her very happy. Lu Yi sat down again and looked Hua Xiai up and down, feeling that this was somewhat unreal. Because no matter what, he didn't expect Hua Xiai to come here to find him. What's more, she really succeeded. Looking at the aura around Hua Xi's body, it was obvious that she had already reached the 9th order. This cultivation speed was obviously abnormal. After Yi calmed down, Lu Yi asked, "How did you get in?" "I walked in," Hua Xiai replied matter-of-factly. "Have the people from Myriad Demon Ridge retreated?" "No, there are many people outside. There are thousands of them in the sky and on the ground. There are also people constantly entering the forest to search for you. This time, you can't escape even if you have wings." "Then, how did you walk in?" "I'm a medical cultivator. There was a group of people from Myriad Demon Ridge who needed a medical cultivator to accompany them, so I walked in with them." Lu Yi wanted to ask where the group of Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators went, but he suddenly caught a glimpse of a string of storage bags hanging from Hua Xi's waist. There were at least 30 or 40 of them. There was no need to ask. The fate of that group of Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators was obvious. Lu Yi was shocked. He didn't know what kind of inheritance Hua Xiai had obtained in the Ying Mountains this time. She, a 9th order medical cultivator, had actually killed a group of Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators in one fell swoop. Looking at the number of storage bags, at least 20 Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators had died at her hands. What puzzled Lu Yi even more was that even if this woman was an excellent medical cultivator, how did she resist the corrosion of the poisonous fog and poison barrier? He could resist it because of the innate skill tree, but he wasn't resisting it. The highly toxic poison that had invaded his body had been burned away. It seemed that it had something to do with the inheritance she obtained in the Ying Mountains this time. The meat is burnt," Hua Xiai suddenly said. "Ah." Hurried to the bonfire and turned the barbecue over. Hua Xiai looked at Lu Yi and sized him up, "You're not poisoned." The reason why she had stubbornly come here to find Lu Yi was that she was afraid that he would be poisoned to death in the Myriad Poison Forest. But now, looking at Lu Yi, there was no sign of being poisoned at all. On the other hand, seemed to be poisoned. "I'm immune to poison," Lu Yi asked back, "Why aren't you poisoned?" "You're the same." Hua Xiai smiled kindly. She walked to Lu Ye's side, squatted down, and ordered, "Give me your hand." Lu Yi obediently stretched out his hand. Hua Xiai raised 2 fingers and put them on his wrist. Although Lu Yi didn't seem to be poisoned on the surface, many highly toxic poisons were extremely hidden. How could she rest assured if she didn't check it herself? After a quick check, she confirmed that Lu Yi really wasn't poisoned. "Open your mouth." "Ah." Lu Yi opened his mouth wide. "Stick out your tongue." "That's enough." Lu Yi refused. That's not up to you." Hua Xiai suddenly grabbed Lu Ye's hand. Her small hand was soft and warm to the touch, like warm jade. Lu Yi immediately felt his hand go numb, as if he had been stung by a poisonous bee. But that feeling disappeared in an instant. Hua Xiai raised her hand and pinched Lu Ye's mouth, wanting to pull out his tongue for a closer look. But before she could do anything, Lu Yi had already raised his hand and pinched her cheek. Nice touch. Hua Xi's mouth formed a circle. Their eyes met. Hua Xi blinked, her eyes filled with confusion. That shouldn't be the case. The moment she grabbed Lu Ye's hand, Lu Yi shouldn't have been able to move. What are you doing? Lu Yi asked in a muffled voice. You. Hua Xi didn't know what to say. Yi turned to look at them. She saw the two of them pinching each other's cheeks and pouting their lips as they looked at each other affectionately. Recalling Hua Xi's previous words, Yi stomped her foot, turned around, and transformed into a streak of light that rushed into Hu Po's body. She couldn't watch anymore. Hu Po, who was squatting on Lu Ye's shoulder, also used his claws to cover his eyes. You poisoned me. Lu Yi didn't realize it until now, because there was an abnormality in the source spirit cavity's talent tree. A large amount of gray smoke rose up and then dissipated. This was a sign that the poison was being burned. Why are you fine? This was what Hua Xi didn't understand the most. I already told you that I'm immune to poison. Impossible. Hua Xi clearly didn't believe it. How could there be anyone in this world who was immune to poison? Let go first. You let go first. Okay, I'll let go first. Lu Yi looked at Hua Xi's face. Only then did Hua Xi let go, but their other hands were still tightly clasped together. The gray smoke from the talent tree grew thicker. Chapter 381. Lu Yi glanced at the talent tree in his source aperture, then looked at Hua Xi in front of him. Why did you poison me, you poisonous woman? Hua Xi was surprised. Are you really immune to poison? Do you think I'm joking with you? I don't believe it. What kind of inheritance did you get? Lu Yi didn't think Hua Xi wanted to poison him, but looking at the current situation, Hua Xi didn't look much different from before, just that her cultivation had increased by a level, but in fact, she had the ability to poison people without anyone noticing. No, this situation was more like she had a strong poison in her body. She didn't make any movements or traces of poisoning, just holding his hand, and the poison entered his body. If this was really the case, then his casual words about being a poisonous woman would really come true. Lu Yi was even more curious about the inheritance she got in Ing Mountain. That was the inheritance of a medical practitioner, how could it be related to poison? But thinking about how Hua Xi's mushroom technique was obtained from that inheritance, it didn't seem very strange. Moreover, many medical practitioners in the 9 provinces were good at using poison. After all, poison was also a kind of medicine. So the medical practitioner who left the inheritance didn't seem to be very serious. Are you really okay? Don't force yourself. The two were very close, one hand wrapped around the other, looking very intimate. Hua Xi whispered softly. If one ignored the green light that constantly appeared on Lu Ye's wrist and then disappeared, anyone who saw the two would think that they were partners who had reunited after a long time and were telling each other their hearts. How could I not be okay? Lu Yi raised his other hand and held Hua Xi's small hand in his palm, gently rubbing it, but you, on the other hand, have worked hard all the way. Hua Xi smiled sweetly. It's not hard, it's what I should do. She secretly swore in her heart, I don't believe I can't poison you. She thought that after getting the inheritance of Ing Mountain, the man in front of her would no longer be able to show off in front of her, but who would have thought that this guy was really immune to poison? She had rushed over from afar, only to be taken advantage of as soon as they met. She thought that her body was full of poison and that anyone who touched it would die, but it turned out that he didn't care at all. A dark green color continuously appeared on Lu Ye's hands, and then continuously disappeared. In the source spiritual cavity, the poison that had been burned out from the innate skill tree was already emitting thick gray smoke, which was a spectacular sight to behold. Gradually, Hua Xi could not take it anymore. She gritted her teeth and said, "Let go." Lu Yi looked at her with a smile. He didn't know what was going on with the inheritance this woman had obtained in Ing Mountain, but it was obvious that she wanted to put him in his place just now. She didn't expect that he had the innate skill tree to protect him, making him immune to all poisons. This time, he had gone for wool and come home shorn. Hua Xiai turned to the side and shouted, "He's behaving like a hooligan. Take care of him." Only then did Lu Yi let go of Hua Xi's hand and said seriously, "I'll spar with you when I have time. Next time, you're not allowed to call anyone." Hua Xiai glared at him and shook her hand that was being held by Lu Yi. It hurt a little. She stood up and looked around. "If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have rushed over. Where's Giant Armor? Didn't you say that he was with you? Why don't I see him?" Promoted to Yunhe and returned to the main sect. Hua Xiai was shocked. Giant Armor promoted to Yunhe? Wasn't he only Heaven 7 before? His innate skill is extraordinary. He did not explain too much. Only he and Yi knew that Giant Armor had a demon core in his body. It was not good to spread it around. Hua Xiai nodded slightly and called out again, "Yi." Yi appeared in a flash. She lowered her head and her face was red. The scene just now had quite a big impact on her. She still had not recovered from it. Growing up, no one had ever been so affectionate in front of her. Hua Xiai walked up with a smile and grabbed Yi's hand. She examined it slightly. "It's not a big problem." As she said this, she pulled Yi's hand and sat to the side. She did not know how she did it, but in just a moment, the green color on Yi's body disappeared at a visible rate. It quickly disappeared completely. Since she could poison, she could naturally detoxify it. Yi had not been infected with much poison, so Hua Xiai could easily detoxify it. If Giant Armor was still here, Hua Xiai could easily treat it. However, Giant Armor's condition at that time could not be delayed. No one knew how long he could last. Moreover, Lu Yi did not know that Hua Xiai would come over at that time, nor did he know that she had such a strange ability. Therefore, it was best to let Giant Armor promote to Yunhe and return to the main sect. "Thank you, Sister Hua Xiai." Yi smiled sweetly. Hua Xiai took her hand and patted it gently. She looked at Lu Yi who was eating barbecued meat. "What do you plan to do next?" "Recuperate and cultivate. That's safe." The forest of 1,000 poisons had been completely sealed off by the myriad Devil Ridge. With their strength, there was no way they could break out unless Lu Yi used the Fire Phoenix again. However, after the previous experience, Lu Yi was not willing to use the spirit pattern again. The after effects were too strong. Although the environment here was not very good, at least there was no danger to their lives. Now that Hua Xiai was here, there was no need to worry about the poisonous fog and miasma around them. Lu Yi had sent a message to Yu Yanzhou saying that he would cultivate here until Heaven 9. This was naturally impossible. With his current Heaven 7 cultivation, it would take him a long time to reach Heaven 9. His temporary target was Heaven 8. Lu Yi felt that with Heaven 8's cultivation, he should be able to break out of this encirclement. While Lu Yi and Hua Xiai were chatting, Yi sat beside Hua Xiai, glancing at her lower abdomen from time to time. In the end, she could not help but reach out and touch it. Hua Xi's arrival undoubtedly gave Lu Yi and Yi an additional layer of protection. Inside the protective array, Lu Yi was recuperating and cultivating. Hua Xiai, on the other hand, brought Yi outside the formation and busied herself. In just a day, a simple 3-story wooden building had been built. There was even a fence around the building, enclosing a small courtyard. Lu Yi set up a new array outside the small building. The group moved into the building, and their living conditions improved by several levels. Lu Yi could not help but sigh. It was really different to have more women by his side. As for Yi, she could only be considered a little girl for now. Lu Ye's days were ordinary, but Hua Xiai was very busy. He rarely saw her a few times a day, so he did not know what she was busy with. However, Lu Yi was sure that since Hua Xiai came to the Myriad Poison Forest, Myriad Demon Ridge's losses had greatly increased. Every time Hua Xiai came back, she would bring back some storage bags, at least a dozen, and at most 20 or 30. She would give them to Lu Yi to open the seal and take out the good things in the storage bags. Lu Yi was getting more and more curious about what kind of inheritance Hua Xiai had obtained in the Ying Mountains. She was a 9th order medical cultivator, yet she could kill those cultivators from the core circle like slaughtering chickens and dogs. The number of storage bags accumulated in the small building had increased to 100 in just a few days. Time passed, the Myriad Demon Ridge's side was not very comfortable these days. Sect Exterminating Yi, who was trapped in the Myriad Poison Forest, was still alive. Although there was no longer any trace of him on the Spirit Stream list, the Myriad Devil Ridge could still use some other channels to inquire about whether he was still alive or not. How could the Myriad Devil Ridge accept the fact that a person who they had thought wouldn't live for long was still alive? It had been almost half a month since Lu Yi was trapped in the Myriad Poison Forest, so how could he still be alive? The Myriad Demon Ridge's side now had two guesses about this situation. The first was that Sect Exterminating Yi had a way to resist the poison in the Myriad Poison Forest, but the possibility was not high. After all, the Myriad Poison Forest was a forbidden area for cultivators. How could a Spirit Stream Realm cultivator resist for so long? The second possibility was that he had found a safe place without poisonous fog or miasma, so he could live until now. If that was the case, then this guy's luck was too good. The entire Myriad Poison Forest was filled with poisonous fog and miasma everywhere, so how could he find a safe place? These days, the Myriad Demon Ridge had been organizing people to enter the Myriad Poison Forest to search for traces of Lu Yi. Although the exploration in the first few days was difficult, there were no losses, and the cultivators who entered the Myriad Poison Forest would safely evacuate in time. However, from the third day onwards, the situation became a little strange. First, a group of more than 20 people was completely annihilated in the Myriad Poison Forest. By the time someone found them, they had already turned into eerie white bones. A day later, another Myriad Demon Ridge cultivator disappeared in the forest. After that, every day, there would be a large number of Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators dying in the forest. This forbidden area for cultivators was like a sleeping fierce beast that had been disturbed by the Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators and had awakened from its slumber. It wanted to use the lives of the Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators to quell its anger. No one knew how those Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators had died, because according to the initial exploration experience, the place where they had died was not too dangerous, only a few kilometers deep into the Myriad Poison Forest. Because of Lu Yi, the Myriad Demon Ridge had suffered heavy casualties. At this point, the Myriad Demon Ridge was in a difficult position. Thousands of cultivators had gathered outside the Myriad Poison Forest, and they were all cultivators from the core area. This would definitely have a great impact on their cultivation. They could not stay here for a long time. If that was the case, their cultivation would not improve. No one knew how long that bastard Lu Yi could last before dying. Moreover, given the current situation, the Myriad Demon Ridge no longer dared to casually send people into the Myriad Poison Forest to explore. However, they were unwilling to leave just like that. What made them feel even worse was that the Grand Sky Alliance was still causing trouble. Although the Grand Sky Alliance did not gather as many people as the Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators, they were scattered around the periphery and constantly attacked the Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators who came to support them or were alone. This also caused great trouble and losses for the Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators. No matter how hard the cultivators of the Myriad Demons Ridge racked their brains, they couldn't understand how the Battle of Encirclement and using the giant armor to lure Lu Yi out had turned out like this. Then, they received even more worrisome news. The giant armor that should have been trapped in the Myriad Poison Forest with Lu Yi had actually appeared in the Cloud River battlefield. The myriad Demon Ridge cultivators were about to go crazy. Everyone can follow my public profile and search for Momo Benzin. There will be related posts in the book every day. Chapter 382. In the small building, Lu Yi was reading by candlelight. Hua Xi walked over with a clay pot and knelt beside Lu Yi. She took out a bowl and scooped out some milky white soup from the pot. An alluring aroma immediately filled the room. Drink the soup. Hua Xi's voice was as gentle as water. She was like a virtuous wife as she placed the bowl filled with milky white soup in front of Lu Yi. Lu Yi put down the book in his hand and looked at the strange thing that looked like a scorpion tail in the bowl. The corners of his eyes couldn't help but twitch. Ever since Hua Xi arrived, his health had been improving day by day. It had to be said that with a true medical practitioner by his side, his recovery was much faster than if he had done it himself. A few days ago, his body had recovered greatly and his strength had long since been restored. And all of this was thanks to the medicinal soup that Hua Xi carefully simmered every day. Not only was this medicinal soup very nutritious, but it also tasted very good. If it weren't for the fact that a large amount of gray smoke rose from Lu Ye's talent tree every time he drank it, Lu Yi might really think that it was simmered with some precious medicinal ingredients. But in reality, the ingredients for this medicinal soup were all found by Hua Xi in the Forest of 1,000 Poisons. There were poisonous creatures everywhere in the Forest of 1,000 Poisons. Spiders, toads, scorpions, poisonous snakes, centipedes, and the like, all of them had appeared in the clay pot used to simmer the soup. The ingredients used to simmer the soup were indeed a little novel, but the effect was really good. According to Hua Xi, since Lu Yi was immune to poison, she should naturally take care of him with all her abilities. Lu Yi suspected that this woman was taking revenge on him and wanted to see him make a fool of himself. Taking the bowl Hua Xi handed over, Lu Yi drank slowly. Hua Xi also filled a bowl for herself and enjoyed it with him. Suddenly, she turned to look at Hu Pe. Want some? Hu Pe, who was glaring at them with his tiger eyes, didn't even think about it. He quickly jumped up and jumped out of the window. Hu Pe wasn't afraid of anything. Recently, he had been avoiding Hua Xi whenever he saw her. Right, this is for you. Lu Yi suddenly remembered something and took out a bracelet from his storage bag and handed it to Hua Xi. Hua Xi's beautiful eyes narrowed. What is it? A token of love. Our Lu family's heirloom has always been passed down to the eldest daughter-in-law. Hua Xi took it and put it on her hand. She tried it on for a while and figured out its function. She took it off and handed it back. You need it more than I do. This bracelet had the function of concealing one's body and aura. It was the vanishing bracelet that Madame Yun had given to Lu Yi. Lu Yi activated the concealment spirit tattoo in front of her to enhance herself. Only then did Hua Xi put the disappearance bracelet back on her wrist. Recently, she had been constantly hunting myriad Devil Ridge cultivators, so this thing was indeed useful. When she killed her enemies, she relied on secretly poisoning them. With the special environment of the 10,000 poison forest, people would not even know why they died. If she had the disappearance bracelet, it would be like adding wings to a tiger. As for Lu Ye's claim that it was the Lu family's heirloom and had always been passed down to the eldest daughter-in-law, Hua Xi only treated it as a fart. The two of them quickly finished the pot of medicinal soup. Hua Xi tidied up and left the wooden house. She found a place nearby to cultivate in peace. As she inhaled and exhaled, the surrounding dark green poisonous fog was absorbed into her body. Ever since she had completely inherited Ying Shan's inheritance, Hua Xi's cultivation method had become different from ordinary people. Now, she wanted to quickly increase her strength. She did not need much spirit energy, but she needed a lot of poison. Simply put, the more potent the poison, the more it could increase her strength. The 10,000 poison forest was a forbidden area for cultivators, but to Hua Xiai, there was no better cultivation environment in the entire spirit stream battlefield. On the third floor of the small building, Lu Yi flipped open a page and saw a new spirit tattoo. He carefully examined it. His originally indifferent expression immediately became focused, and even his body sat up straight. The spirit tattoo he had mastered now came from two sources. One was naturally the spirit tattoo on the leaves of the talent tree. He could use this type of spirit tattoo as he wished without worrying about the risk of failure. In fact, until now, he had not failed to construct a spirit tattoo. Even for the fire phoenix, he had successfully constructed it on his first try, but the consequences were somewhat serious. The other source was what he had learned from books. Compared to the former, the spirit tattoo from this source had a considerable risk of failure. The more complex the spirit tattoo, the greater the risk of failure. Therefore, when Lu Yi fought with others, he only used the spirit tattoo he had obtained from the talent tree. He did not dare to use the spirit tattoo he had learned from books, because any mistake in battle could lead to eternal damnation. He could not bear the consequences of failing to construct a spirit tattoo. However, the spirit tattoo he had learned was also very useful. For example, he could set it up in a formation and make it work. Different spirit tattoos had different degrees of complexity. Depending on the number of yin and yang required to construct a spirit tattoo, one could actually divide the spirit tattoo into different grades. It was not that he was arrogant, but that he had a unique condition that no one else had. That was, the talent tree. It took Lu Yi a whole day to dismantle the entire spiritual inscription and familiarize himself with its structure. The next thing to do was to try to construct it. He took out a jade tablet from his storage bag and urged his spiritual power to construct the spiritual inscription on the jade tablet. Using the jade tablet to construct the spiritual inscription could make it easier to observe and summarize. At the same time, it could also make the spiritual inscription more stable. In addition, if the construction failed, it would not cause any damage to the body. These were all the benefits that Madame Yun had taught him before. If he didn't use the jade tablet, once the construction failed, his spiritual power would explode, which would easily pose a threat to him. Time flew by, and the days passed. The forest of 1,000 poisons was calm. The cultivators of the myriad demon ridge were still surrounding the forest, unwilling to leave easily. No one knew if Lu Yi would escape this time. There would not be such a good opportunity in the future. Therefore, no matter how impatient the myriad demon ridge was, they could only wait like this. In the wooden house in the forest, Lu Yi did not forget his own cultivation while familiarizing himself with the spiritual inscription. He took a lot of spiritual pills and opened his spiritual apertures one after another. When he entered the forest of 1,000 poisons, his spiritual apertures had only opened 248 apertures, which was only 8 more than when he set off from the blue blood sect station. Now that he had been trapped in the forest of 1,000 poisons for a month, his spiritual apertures had opened 275 apertures, which was almost 1 aperture per day. This speed was enough to leave all the spirit stream realm cultivators in the 9 provinces in the dust. He had an abundance of spiritual pills and fuel for his innate skill tree. Apart from resting for 6 to 8 hours every day, Lu Yi was almost always in a state of cultivation and reading. From the looks of it, being trapped in the forest of 1,000 poisons was not necessarily a bad thing for him. Especially after Hua Xi's arrival, Lu Yi had set up a spirit gathering formation in the wooden house and constructed spiritual inscriptions in his spiritual apertures, greatly increasing his cultivation efficiency. He had not done this before because he was worried that the flow of spiritual qi of heaven and earth would put too much of a burden on the formation. If the formation was damaged, Yi and Hupo would definitely be poisoned. However, with Hua Xi, he did not need to worry about this. Even if the formation was damaged, Hua Xi would be able to cure the poison. This was the core region, so the spiritual qi of heaven and earth was still very dense. It was just that without the support of the Pillar of Heaven's secrets, it was not that exaggerated. He was only 25 apertures away from reaching the celestial 8 realm. Originally, he had planned to kill his way out of the forest of 1,000 poisons after reaching the celestial 8 realm. However, ever since he saw the spiritual inscription in the book, he had more ideas. Whether he could use it or not would depend on how he operated it. Lu Yi could now construct the complicated spiritual inscription in the book, but he could not guarantee the success rate for the time being. This kind of thing required continuous practice, so it could not be rushed. Several days passed quickly. In the wooden house, Lu Yi looked at Hua Xiai in shock as she walked in with a jar in her hand. He focused on her spiritual aperture and confirmed that he was not seeing things. It's already the 7th day. I just broke through today, Hua Xiai answered as she passed a bowl of medicinal soup to Lu Yi. Lu Yi did not dare to believe it. Chapter 383. Because of the talent tree and the help of the gluttony meal, Lu Yi could continuously consume spirit pills to improve his cultivation. Therefore, he had always been very confident in his speed of opening apertures. Among all the spirit stream realm cultivators in the 9 states, there should be no one faster than him in terms of speed of opening apertures. With a Heaven 7 cultivation, who could maintain the speed of opening 1 aperture a day in this environment? Who could compare? Until he saw Hua Xiai today. When Hua Xiai left the station and went to Ying Mountain, she was only an 8th order cultivator. When she entered the myriad poison forest, her cultivation had reached the 9th order. It could be explained that she had obtained enough benefits in the land of inheritance to increase her cultivation. However, it had only been a month since she entered the myriad poison forest, and she had actually reached the Heaven 7 realm from the 9th order. One had to know that after the 9th order, every breakthrough required 60 apertures to open. Opening 60 apertures in a month was basically opening 2 apertures a day. He couldn't compare. Lu Yi more or less knew how Hua Xiai cultivated during this time. She didn't stay in the wooden house most of the time because of the isolation of the spirit array. There was no poisonous fog in the wooden house. However, Lu Yi didn't expect that Hua Xi's cultivation method, which was against the norm, would increase her cultivation so quickly. Right now, they were both Heaven 7 cultivators. At this rate, Hua Xi's cultivation would surpass his sooner or later. Lu Yi felt an inexplicable sense of urgency. Zhu Jia had reached the Cloud River realm earlier than him because he had accumulated enough and had a unique monster core. He had the capital to reach the Cloud River realm long ago. If Hua Xiai reached the Cloud River realm earlier than him one day, however, from another perspective, this might not be a bad thing for Hua Xiai. The sense of urgency immediately disappeared. Days passed, and Lu Yi still maintained the speed of opening 1 aperture a day. More than a month passed. With a cracking sound, the barrier of the spirit apertures shattered and trickles of spirit chi flowed into the newly opened spirit apertures. 300 apertures. After being trapped in the myriad poison forest for about 2 months, Lu Yi had forcefully opened his spirit apertures from 240 to 300. Now that the number of spirit apertures was sufficient, the next step was to increase his cultivation. He urged his spiritual power to run through the 60 orifices that did not fit his body shape, forming a new small cycle. When the spiritual power could circulate continuously in this small system without the need for the leaves to sway, waves of air swept across, forming the 8 heavens. Lu Yi sat down for another day, consolidating his cultivation base, and making sure that there were no problems with the new minor circulation system. He stood up. He walked out of the wooden house and went to the courtyard outside to get busy. He set down the array flags one by one and constructed the framework of an array formation. Yi watched curiously from the side. Lu Yi, what kind of array formation are you setting up? A fun formation. Lu Yi casually replied. It wasn't that he wanted to hide anything. It was just that this was his first time setting up this kind of array and he didn't know if it would work. If it didn't work and he boasted in front of Yi in advance, wouldn't he lose face? Once the framework of the formation was formed, Lu Yi once again used his spiritual power to enrich the internal structure of the formation. After some work, he finally managed to construct the core of the formation. The core was the more than 3,000 yin-yang spirit runes that he had spent a lot of time and effort to learn from the books. These days, he had been practicing this spirit rune every day. Although there was still a chance of failure, the success rate had increased greatly. This time, his luck was better, and he was able to complete it in one go. After following Lu Yi for so long, Yi had some understanding of spirit runes. Looking at the core of the formation, she couldn't help but be speechless. Lu Yi, this spirit rune is so complicated. What kind of spirit rune is this? Void. Void? Yes, this spirit rune's name is Void. This was a spirit rune related to space. Different ways of using it would produce different effects. If it was used as the core of a formation and set up with special means, it would become the famous teleportation formation. There were teleportation formations in the 9 provinces, but there weren't many of them. This was because it was very convenient for cultivators to travel between the 9 provinces, and they could borrow the Tianji pillar of the Alliance sect. The Tianji pillar itself had the effect of teleportation, so unless it was necessary, no one would waste time and effort to set up a teleportation formation. Moreover, teleportation formations needed to be maintained frequently, and it was far less convenient than using the Tianji pillar. The Tianji pillar was a gift from the heavens, and it was very difficult to damage it. The teleportation formation that Lu Yi had set up was very crude because it was built with the formation flags as the framework and his own spirit energy. In order to maintain the formation's operation, Lu Yi had made some slight changes to the teleportation formation so that it could gather the surrounding spirit energy and maintain it for a long time. With his current attainments in the Tao of formations, he could already do this. In fact, if he had a formation disc, it would be the best choice. With the help of a formation disc, the formation would be more stable. Child arrays could be teleported to and from the mother array, but not between child arrays. Multipoint to multipoint teleportation arrays were both child arrays and mother arrays. Different types of teleportation arrays were set up differently and required various considerations. Right now, Lu Yi was setting up a single point to single point teleportation array. The one in the small courtyard outside the wooden house was the mother array. He still needed to go somewhere else to set up a child array before he could test whether this teleportation array was useful. As night fell, Hua Xiai returned from her nearby cultivation. Seeing Yi squatting in the courtyard with Hupa beside her, she could not help but be curious. "What are you doing here?" "Lu Yi set up an array and asked me to watch it for him," Yi replied truthfully. "Where is he?" "I don't know." A moment later, Hua Xiai and Yi squatted together in the courtyard and stared at the teleportation array in front of them. "Yi, did he say what this array is for?" "No." "So secretive." At the same time, in an open space 20 miles away, Lu Yi stepped on the newly set up child teleportation array and activated the array beneath his feet with his spirit energy. In an instant, through the circulation of the array, he vaguely felt that there was something in the direction of the wooden house that was resonating with the array beneath his feet. It was very successful. The 2 teleportation arrays resonated, which meant that there was no problem with the array he had set up. Next, it would depend on whether he could teleport over. As he continued to channel his spirit energy into the array beneath his feet, the space around Lu Yi suddenly began to distort. An indescribable force wrapped around him, giving him the illusion that he had stepped on air and fallen into a bottomless abyss. That feeling came and went quickly. By the time he came back to his senses, he had already appeared in another location. At the same time, outside the wooden house, Yi and Hua Xiai, who were squatting beside the teleportation array, listened attentively. There seemed to be some strange sounds coming from not far away. "What's that sound?" Yi asked curiously. "Perhaps there's some poisonous creature passing by nearby." Hua Xiai tilted her head in response. This poisonous creature should not be small, otherwise, it would not have caused such a big commotion. It was probably a poisonous python. Hua Xiai had seen many of these poisonous creatures in the forest of 1,000 poisons these days, and she had cooked most of them into soup. Why is this array broken? He asked again. Just now, there was some movement in the array in front of them, causing the space covered by the array to become extremely distorted. Immediately after, the spirit energy in the array became chaotic and it was completely damaged. Did you hear someone shouting for help? Hua Xiai asked while listening attentively. Did I? Listen carefully. Also listened attentively, and soon a strange expression appeared on her face. It seems to be Lu Ye's voice. The two women looked at each other, quickly got up, and walked towards the source of the sound. A moment later, they saw a figure hanging from a big tree a few hundred feet away from the wooden house like a ragged sack. Lu Yi. Yi was shocked and hurriedly flew forward and carried Lu Yi down. Looking around, Lu Ye's clothes were ragged and his body was covered in bloody wounds. Some of them were so deep that bones could be seen. His whole body was dyed red with blood. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.